Chapter 8:18. In the murderous stone scenic area of Suyi, Lu Feier looked around curiously. Although she already knew the identity of the mystical silver fox, she didn't know what the relationship between the mystical silver fox and this place was. She didn't know why the mystical silver fox looked at all this in front of her with such vicissitudes in her eyes, as if she had been here hundreds of years ago. There was a faint smell of sulfur in the air around the murderous stone scenic area, which smelled a little different. There were many tourists here, many of whom were Chinese. Lu Feier heard from the Chinese tour guide that the smell of sulfur was the poisonous gas left by the algae 900 years ago. Originally, the poisonous gas here was so strong that people would die if they got close to it, but after 900 years of evacuation, there was only a little smell of sulfur left. But the stream near the Killing Life Stone was polluted by the algae, so it was still undrinkable. But strangely, although the stream was undrinkable, it still had the miraculous effect of beautifying one's face. Therefore, many female tourists gathered in front of the stream. Some held the water in their hands and used it to wash their faces. Some simply emptied the mineral water they carried with them and put the empty bottle into the stream. After filling it with water, they beamed with satisfaction and left. Lu Feier was a rare beauty, but the more beautiful a woman was, the more she loved to be beautiful. Lu Feier saw that many female tourists were washing their faces with water by the stream. She couldn't help squatting down curiously and bending down to hold the water. However, Lu Feier was too beautiful. As soon as she squatted down, the female tourists nearby unconsciously made way for her. They didn't want to stand with her and become her foil. Lu Feier had been with the mystical silver fox for the past few days, so she didn't have the time or condition to do any maintenance, let alone anything like a spa or skin care. At this time, she held the water and applied it to her face. She immediately felt that her skin seemed to be greedily absorbing the water, and her face suddenly had a cool and moisturizing feeling. After washing her face, she took out her mobile phone and took a picture of herself. Sure enough, her face seemed to have become more lustrous, as if it did have the effect of beauty and nourishing her face. Lu Feier couldn't help but wonder, it's really amazing. Why can't this water be drunk, but it has the effect of beautifying and nourishing the skin? The mystical silver fox couldn't help but sneer and say, nonsense, this land was soaked by my jinqi and magic power, and the stream in the mountain was naturally full of my residual magic power and jinqi. If people drank it at that time, their blood and qi would boil and their meridians would burst and they would die. Although it has been nearly 900 years, and the magic power and true essence that I left behind in the past have almost dissipated, this kind of water is still not something that ordinary people can drink. If it is drunk into the body, it will cause the internal organs to churn, and the blood and qi will be disturbed. However, if it is only applied externally, it will sting the skin, and it has the effect of promoting blood circulation and nourishing the skin. This principle is the same as the soap you are using now. You can use it but you can't eat it. Lu Feier suddenly understood and said, oh, but soon her eyes widened. She stared at the mystical silver fox and stammered, what? You just said that this piece of land left behind your true what yuan? Could it be that you are Yuyuzeo? The mystical silver fox glanced at her and said with some disdain, that's the name given to me by the Japanese. Lu Feier was born in a famous family and had an excellent upbringing. Although she was not well read, she was not modest when she said that she was well educated and reasonable. She was very different from many idiots in the entertainment circle who could not even sing the national anthem completely. She didn't know the origin of the mystical silver fox, but Lu Feier, who sometimes went to Japan to film, knew the name of Yuyuzeo. She looked at the mystical silver fox with a face full of shock and fear. At the same time, there was a trace of excitement in her heart. Sister Chao's previous life turned out to be Yuyuzeo? But she said that she was the mystical silver fox. Why haven't I heard of the name mystical silver fox? Lu Feier couldn't help but ask the mystical silver fox the question in her heart. Then the mystical silver fox sneered and said meaningfully, do you think that the rulers of all dynasties will like a person like me? Lu Feier blinked her eyes and didn't seem to understand. She didn't know that the mystical silver fox had once caused a great disturbance in the Chinese cultivation world, and even contributed to the destruction of the late Tang dynasty. Since she was driven out by the Chinese cultivation world, the Chinese cultivation world began to block the mystical silver fox and kill the fox Zen men, which caused the fox Zen men to decline rapidly. The big and small foxes all fled into the deep mountains and forests, not daring to come out easily. Naturally, it was impossible for the rulers of China to pursue a nine-tailed celestial fox that the heavens did not care about. Moreover, no matter whether they believed in Buddhism or Taoism, these two sects hated the mystical silver fox to the extreme and gnashed their teeth. Therefore, in order to get the support of these cultivators, the first thing the emperors had to do was to block any books and oral stories about the mystical silver fox. Slowly, the illustrious reputation of the mystical silver fox was buried in the world of history. However, her name shone in another form in another border country. Of course, the mystical silver fox would not show off the past superficially, so she kept her mouth shut about the past. Lu Feier had to think hard about it and did not dare to ask more questions. After a while, the mystical silver fox continued to walk toward the Stone of Slaughter scenic area, and Lu Feier followed closely behind. The two of them walked along the stone road and finally came to the place where the Stone of Slaughter was located. Lu Feier looked around and saw that there were black stones everywhere in this stone field. In this stone field, there were many big and small stone monks. Some of these stone monks were bald, and some had white or red hats on their heads. They looked very interesting with red and white. Lu Feier heard from the tour guide that these stone monks were all erected to commemorate the monks who had chanted scriptures to suppress the demon aura in front of them. The largest of them was the stone statue of monk Yuan Wang. The stone statue of Yuan Wang was sitting cross-legged on the largest black stone of slaughter. There was a stone lotus seat under his feet. He was wearing a hat made of red thread and his hands were pinching his fingers. There were 4 stone monks standing beside him. Beside the stone monk, there was a large cube stone. Many tourists here also built stone towers on these black stone of slaughter to commemorate monk Yuan Wang. They intended to continue to suppress and seal the mystical silver fox. Lu Feier listened to the tour guide's explanation while watching the tourists build up the stone tower. At the same time, she quietly observed the expression of the mystical silver fox out of the corner of her eye. She saw that the mystical silver fox's face was cold, her eyes were full of ridicule, and there was a disdainful sneer on the corner of her mouth. Lu Feier was very worried that with the arrogance of the mystical silver fox, she would kill these civilians. Fortunately, the mystical silver fox just watched coldly from the side and did not do anything excessive. But soon, a few bald monks in monk robes passed by this small road. When they headed for the temple on the mountainside, the mystical silver fox's eyes were immediately filled with killing intent. Her whole body became murderous, and the original black eyes in her eyes turned blood red in an instant. Lu Feier was so scared that she shivered. She couldn't help but reach out to grab the mystical silver fox. As soon as the mystical silver fox was pulled by her, it immediately turned its head and stared at Lu Feier with terrifying eyes, without saying a word. Lu Feier was so scared that her scalp exploded. Her blood almost froze. She stammered, What do you want to do? Don't be impulsive. The mystical silver fox's blood-red eyes stared at Lu Feier for a long time. Slowly, the killing intent in her eyes subsided little by little, and her eyes turned from blood-red to pitch black. The mystical silver fox said in an extremely cold voice, If there is another time, I will kill you first. Are you kidding me? In those days, I killed whoever I wanted to kill. I was so proud of my kindness and enmity. Today, you, a little mortal, dare to come and tell me what to do? Lu Feier was so shocked that her pretty face turned pale. She nodded quickly and didn't dare to say another word. The mystical silver fox glanced at the monk who had left, and the pupils in her eyes instantly shrank into needles. Her sharp eyes shot out like a sharp sword, which was noticed by the 2 monks at once. They turned around in surprise and looked in the direction of her eyes. But when they turned around, the mystical silver fox had already retracted her gaze, turned around, and left slowly. How could the two monks have expected that the mystical silver fox, who had been sealed 900 years ago, was right beside them? She had almost killed them. If they had known this, they would have been scared to death on the spot. After looking at it for a while, the two monks found nothing unusual, so they turned around and left. The mystical silver fox walked along the road to the hotel near the scenic spot. When they arrived at the hotel, Lu Feier couldn't help but ask boldly, "Are we staying here today?" The mystical silver fox didn't look back and said, "Is there anything strange?" Lu Feier said in a low voice, "Ciao. No, you don't seem to have a carry-on bag, passport and money." The mystical silver fox said casually, "Don't you have it?" Hearing this, Lu Feier was stunned. She said in a low voice, "My bag was also lost when the car was smashed. If you hadn't taken me here, I wouldn't have been able to enter the country." The mystical silver fox thought for a moment and said in a cold voice, "Then kill all the people in this hotel." After that, she stepped in. Lu Feier was stunned. She watched the mystical silver fox walk into the hotel. She wanted to stop it, but she remembered the warning of the mystical silver fox before. She didn't dare to persuade it again, for fear that the big devil would be angry and kill her as well. Lu Feier was stunned for a while. Suddenly, she couldn't help but shout in panic. She chased after the mystical silver fox and walked in. At this time, no one in the Japanese cultivation world noticed that the mystical silver fox had returned to the old place and returned to their land. She was hiding in the dark and watching them covetously, ready to launch a terrible attack on the Japanese cultivation world at any time. Chapter 8:19. The mystical silver fox did not immediately launch a crazy revenge on the Japanese cultivation world. She patiently lurked and hid in a place that no one would have thought of. At this time, the Japanese cultivation world and the whole country were in a state of peace. Although on the other side of the distant coast, the Chinese cultivation world was welcoming the annual spring festival, the Japanese side was calm. In order to avoid revealing her whereabouts, the mystical silver fox did not kill the owner of the hotel in the end. She just deceived them with a simple illusion, but she swaggered in with Lu Feier. A few days later, the spring festival was approaching quickly. Lu Feier sat under the eaves of the Japanese house in boredom all day, looking at the direction of her hometown in a daze. She didn't know if she could go back alive, nor did she know if she could see her family again. But at least there was no hope for this year's spring festival. The mystical silver fox also restrained her aura and knelt on the tatami like an ordinary person. She looked at the people outside the corridor with flickering eyes, as if she was thinking about something. She was a famous cultivator in the Tang dynasty. Her words and deeds still carried the customs of the Tang dynasty. For example, kneeling on the ground like this, she did it very skillfully and naturally. The culture and etiquette of the Japanese were almost completely copied from the Tang dynasty. Even the Japanese themselves admitted that without the Tang dynasty, there would be no Japanese culture and etiquette. Therefore, the natural behavior of the mystical silver fox made her look no different from the authentic Japanese. Especially after taking a bath, she wore a kimono. She was really beautiful. On the contrary, Lu Feier was not used to it. She just sat on her side, one hand on the ground, and the other hand playing with a blade of grass in boredom. After a while, the mystical silver fox looked around coldly for a while and suddenly asked, "Why are these Japanese so leisurely?" Lu Feier was stunned and asked curiously, "What?" The mystical silver fox pointed to some Japanese people who were bending down to clean. "Why aren't they busy preparing for the new year? Isn't it going to be the new year? Or are they ready?" Lu Feier laughed and said, "The Japanese don't celebrate the spring festival." The mystical silver fox's eyes narrowed and she asked in surprise, "Why?" She had lived in Japan for a long time and knew a lot of Japanese customs. At that time, everyone in Japan celebrated the spring festival. At that time, the spring festival was the most important festival in Japan. When the spring festival came, the whole country was jubilant, and the emperor would also celebrate with the people. Even the poorest people would try their best to change into a new set of clothes, eat a steaming meal of rice balls, and then go to the nearest temple or shrine to worship, praying that the next year would be more prosperous. Lu Feier looked at the mystical silver fox with a strange expression and said timidly, "You may. Well, you have been sealed for too long. I don't know what has happened in the past 900 years. In the past, the Japanese did celebrate the Spring Festival, but after the Meiji Restoration, Japan announced that it would leave Asia and enter Europe, so it no longer celebrated the Spring Festival and changed it to New Year's Day." The mystical silver fox narrowed her eyes and couldn't help laughing coldly. Even in the era when she was sealed, the reign of the Emperor Nyoyu corresponded to the period of Emperor Huizong and Emperor Qinzong of Song. At that time, the northern Song dynasty died out and the southern Song dynasty was established. Although the Song dynasty was surrounded by Liao, Jin and Xixia at that time, it was besieged on all sides. The military was low and the politics were rotten, but the incomparably powerful Han civilization still radiated throughout Southeast Asia. Almost all countries in Southeast Asia respected the Chinese civilization. Even the Liao state, Xixia state, and later the Jin state, and even the Yuan dynasty, which finally unified China, were all assimilated by the Chinese civilization without exception. Although the Song dynasty in this period was a little weak in military and politics, the mystical silver fox was still able to be fanatically pursued by the daimyo of all countries in Japan when she was in a foreign country. Her mentality was still that of a superior in the Tang and Song dynasties. She couldn't understand why such a little brother, who used to learn everything from China, would turn his back on her one day. Where is the confidence of these guys? The mystical silver fox sneered and said, "What a group of bastards who forget their ancestors. Well, this is even better. I have more reasons to deal with them." Lu Feier heard the murderous intent in her words, and couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. She was afraid that the mystical silver fox would get angry and expand the situation, so she quickly said, "There are many reasons for this. You." Unexpectedly, the mystical silver fox didn't have the patience to listen to her explanation at all. She just asked coldly, "In addition to these Dongying people, which other countries are not celebrating the Spring Festival now?" Lu Feier was shocked when she heard this. She thought to herself, "Oh my God, do you think you are the Emperor of Jade Emperor? Do you want to care about these things? Times are different now." But she still whispered honestly, "There are also North Korea, South Korea, Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia and other countries." The mystical silver fox heard a muffled snort, and the anger on her face eased a lot. She snorted and said, "I see. I will let these Japanese remember a lot of things." Hearing this, Lu Feier complained to herself, "What can I do? If she were to cause some big trouble, would I be considered an accomplice? I'm in trouble." Just as the mystical silver fox was sharpening her knife and Lu Feier was complaining, a few days later, in the distant Tiannan city, Li Yundong and the others finally spent the New Year's Eve together at home, ushering in the first day of the Lunar New Year. On the first day of the new year, many shops did not open and chose to close the market for 3 days. The originally bustling pedestrian street also seemed quite deserted. Only de Sanxian was still open. Many girls who did not go home and chose to work were still busy in the shop. Therefore, early in the morning, Li Yundong took Su Chan and the others to the shop early and gave everyone a big red envelope. Although Feng Na and Qing Sheng had spent the New Year's Eve with their own families, they knew that Li Yundong would come to the store early in the morning to pay his New Year's greetings to the employees. So, they got up early in the morning, dressed up nicely, and rushed to the store. When they arrived at the shop, Li Yundong was already standing at the entrance of the shop. He was wearing a bright red tang suit. Although he looked young, he had an extraordinary temperament. When he saw Feng Na coming, Li Yundong was the first to smile. He cupped his hands and said, "Happy New Year." Today, Feng Na was wearing a wool ball cap, a coffee-made sweater, and a short skirt. She looked both youthful and fashionable. When she saw Li Yundong greeting her, she smiled and cupped her hands in greeting. Congratulations on getting rich. Here comes the red packet. Li Yundong nodded. Give me the red packet. Although Li Yundong had been hiding something in his heart for the past few days, he still looked very happy in front of such a festive occasion. He laughed and took out a red envelope like a magic trick. He handed it to Feng Na and said, "The red envelope is here." Feng Na guessed that Li Yundong would make a big profit today. She pursed her lips and smiled. There really is a red envelope? Ching Ching, who was following behind her, looked curiously at Li Yundong and couldn't help but ask, "Is there a red envelope for me?" Li Yundong smiled and took out another red envelope. Everyone who sees it gets a share. Before Feng Na could take the red envelope, Ching Ching grabbed it unceremoniously and said with a smile, "Well, it's good that there's a share for me." After taking it, Ching Ching squeezed her hand and felt that the red envelope was very light and thin. She rolled her eyes and said angrily, "Hey, big boss, the red envelope is so thin and light. Aren't you a little stingy?" Feng Na immediately glared at her and said, "What nonsense are you talking about?" Li Yundong knew that this big beauty liked to joke around and was straightforward, so he waved his hand without a care and said with a smile, "Open it and take a look." The chairman said, "Well, if you don't investigate, you don't have the right to speak. Don't take it for granted." Ching Ching giggled. She opened the red envelope and took a look inside, only to see that there was only one piece of paper inside. It was a check. She took it out and looked at it. Her eyes suddenly widened and she cried out involuntarily, "No way. So much?" Feng Na, who was standing to one side, was shocked. She looked at the check in Ching Chang's hand and was immediately shocked by the number on it. "Are you kidding me? Last month, I was still a college student who didn't earn a penny, and this month, I can immediately get 50,000 yuan? Even in my dreams, it's not as good as this." Ching Ching stared at the check in her hand, dumbfounded. She knew that Li Yundong was a generous person, and that he would definitely be generous. That was why she had made such a joke with him, but she hadn't expected him to be so generous. She had only worked for the three immortals for less than a month. "That's all?" Ching Chang's eyes widened, and she turned to look at Feng Na. "How much is yours?" Feng Na glanced at Li Yundong, a little embarrassed, as if she was embarrassed to open the red envelope in front of him. But Li Yundong just smiled at her, nodded, and said, "Open it. It's not much. It's just a token of appreciation. It's just a token." Feng Na took a deep breath, opened the red envelope, and saw that there was also a check inside. She glanced at it briefly and saw that it was also a long string of zeros. She was so scared that she immediately closed the red envelope, handed it back, and shook her head. "It's too much. I can't afford it." Li Yundong didn't take it. He just smiled and said, "This is what you deserve. Don't stand on ceremony." Ching Ching, who was standing to one side, smiled and pressed Feng Na's hand. "Okay, don't pretend to be polite." As she said this, she pretended to reach out her hand, patted Li Yundong on the shoulder, and said with a smile, "Well, I was wrong about you just now. I forgive you. You have to keep up the good work, little guy." Although Li Yundong was the boss, he was easygoing. He was used to joking with Feng Na and Ching Ching in the past. He pretended to be a yes man and said, "I will work hard, I will definitely not let down the ardent expectations of the beautiful woman." His appearance made the people around him unable to help but laugh, and Ching Ching was even more giggling. Feng Na looked at them and sighed inwardly. Li Yundong looked at the crowd with a smile and said, "Don't be so happy, everyone. I have something very important to announce." When everyone heard this, they all looked at Li Yundong, wanting to hear what this young and generous little boss had to announce. Halfway through the second chapter, I really can't write anymore. I'll get up tomorrow morning and make up for it. Everyone, don't wait. Chapter 8:20. Li Yundong looked around and saw that there were only 2 or 3 girls who had come to work in the Sanxian store. He smiled and said, "Don't worry. Let's wait until everyone is here. Let's talk about it later." Seeing that he was keeping them in suspense, everyone laughed. It didn't take long for the temporary staff in the store to arrive one after another. Li Yundong gave each of them a big red envelope. For a moment, all the girls cheered, and the entrance of the store was filled with laughter. It was very lively. After a while, everyone had arrived. On the first day of the new year, there were no customers in the store. The hall was full of his own people, and all of them were beautiful girls. Even the girls who had come to work in the Desanxian store were all beautiful. It was like a painting, pleasing to the eye. Li Yundong clapped his hands to attract everyone's attention. He smiled and said, "Today, everyone is here. On the first day of the new year, I have good news for everyone." At this time, a bold girl said, "Li Yun. Boss, are you going to give us 2 red envelopes?" The girls all laughed and said, "Shameless. Isn't 1 red envelope enough? Where else can we find a good boss like Boss Li? He's only been working for a few days, and he's already giving out so many red envelopes. I'm so happy. It's a pity that we can't come to work and make money when school starts. Yeah, it would be great if we could work here all the time." The girls chattered with a face full of happiness and regret at the same time. Li Yundong looked at them with a smile, and suddenly felt very happy and satisfied. This feeling of being able to help others was stronger than making a lot of money himself. He smiled and said, "Today, I want to tell you that Desanxian has hired Feng Na as the manager and Qing Cheng as the deputy manager. In addition, your temporary workers will be turned into regular workers." When the girls heard this, their eyes suddenly widened, and they could hardly believe their ears. Although the girls had initially come to the store because of Li Yundong's fame, they thought to themselves, "Since we have nothing to do here anyway, why not work for the most legendary boy in Tiannan City? I believe that he will treat us well." But the girls didn't expect that Li Yundong would actually treat them so well. In this day and age, it was not difficult to find a job. What was difficult was to find a satisfactory job. Like the one in front of him, he had a monthly salary of more than 5,000 yuan, and he even had such a big red packet for Chinese New Year. Moreover, the place of work was comfortable and elegant. Although he was a waitress, there was not a single troublesome customer. It was very comfortable. They also knew that some of the pretty girls they knew had already gone to sea early, joining the construction army for the prosperity of the motherland. Some of them had already changed into branded clothes and jewelry. Hanging on their necks were all glittering jewels, dazzling people's eyes and lusting their hearts. These girls also adhere to their own bottom line and principles, but even they don't know what will happen in the future, what will happen after graduation. Should he join the growing army of mistresses, or should he contribute to the service industry of the motherland? Or should he honestly find a man to marry, and then his wife and children would warm the Kong, cooking oil, salt, soy sauce, vinegar, firewood, rice, tea, and so on. In the end, he would become a yellow-faced woman who would fight to the death with a mistress. In the end, it was all about money. If there was a decent and well-paid job, who would be willing to do those shameful things? In this world, how many women are born to be cheap? If there was enough income, who wouldn't be willing to hire a nanny? What about cooking all day and getting their face covered in oil, and in the end being disliked by their own man? If they could be financially independent and live a rich life, who would be willing to be a third party, and in the end, shamelessly fight to the death with a big boss on the street? Nowadays, the girls were more mature than the other, and more sensible than the other. Because they understood this, they cherished this job very much, and worked very hard. Especially under the management of Feng Na and Qing Cheng, the business of Desanxian gradually got on the right track. Unlike before when Su Chan took the little foxes, there were no rules, just like a group of grassroots teams. They were beautiful, but when they were asked to serve people, it was really unprofessional. They did whatever they wanted, and they didn't look like a regular army at all. At present, Feng Na and Qing Sheng had specified detailed and strict rules, and the girls were very obedient. They were all dressed in white cheongsams with hairpin flowers, and the slits on both sides of the big skirt reached the waist. With every step they took, the big white skirt was revealed, which was very attractive. The girls took a lot of money and were willing to work. When they saw people, they showed their 8 teeth. Their sweet and sincere smiles dazzled people's eyes and warmed their hearts. It made the guests feel that even if the tea here was not delicious, they were willing to come here and enjoy the atmosphere here. It could be said that these people had officially put Desangxian on the right track, and it no longer relied on some gimmicks to operate. Whether it was gimmicks or flowers, they could only operate for a while, but the regular system and regular personnel were the way to operate for a long time. What kind of person was Li Yundong? Naturally, he saw the change in Desangxian at a glance, so he did not hesitate to announce this decision. When the girls heard Li Yundong's words, they immediately set up a temple for Li Yundong and burned incense and worshipped Buddha every day. One by one, they cheered, and their delicate voices shook the sky, attracting the attention of the few pedestrians on the pedestrian street. Although Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin felt that Li Yundong's decision was a little abrupt and a little anxious, they were very understanding and did not oppose it. Moreover, when they saw the girls smiling from the bottom of their hearts, they also felt warm in their hearts. It could be said that they had released a lot of their suppressed feelings these days. Zhou Qin walked to Li Yundong's side and asked the girls, "What about your studies?" Some of the more courageous girls said carelessly, "With such a good job, as long as we can do it for a long time, why do we still need to go to school? What kind of crap are we learning in school? How many of us will be able to use it after we leave school?" Immediately, a girl echoed, "Yes, yes, Boss Li, we should learn from you. Didn't you also drop out of school halfway and start a business from scratch? We will follow you." The girls giggled, but some of the more mature ones just smiled and did not say anything. Presumably, they still thought that studies were more important. In their opinion, this job was indeed good, but what if the tea house collapsed in the future? Or what if Li Yundong did not care about them? Then what would they do? The weather was unpredictable, and people could have misfortunes and blessings. It was better to have some proof. Li Yundong glanced around and saw the attitude of the girls. He couldn't help laughing, waved his hand, and said, "Don't learn from me. I'm not a good example. If you want to finish your studies, I won't stop you. In the future, when you finish your studies, if you want to come here, I will wait for you. Personally, I don't encourage you to take a break from school to work here. I think if you have some easy courses, you can choose to work here when you are free. You can go back when you are free. Then you can take turns to work here. Isn't this the best of both worlds?" Hearing this, the girls were all overjoyed. They could not wait to hug Li Yundong and give him 2 bites. Of course, they could only think about this in their hearts. Which girl didn't want to be Li Yundong's real girlfriend? But the girl named Su Chan was so beautiful and charming that it made people feel inferior. Even a blind man could see how much Li Yundong doted on her. And these days, they had heard from Feng Na and Qing Sheng that Li Yundong was faithful to his love, which made them sigh. In today's world, where could there be such a good man? Since Li Yundong was a gentleman, they couldn't let him look at them. Therefore, the girls were very reserved. After Li Yundong announced the good news, the little foxes immediately rushed over and looked at Li Yundong pitifully. They floated up to the sky and did not dissipate for a long time. There was a mistake in yesterday's update. I typed one more word. It should be that South Korea and other countries are still celebrating the Spring Festival, and I typed one more word in the question of the mystical silver fox with mystical luck. The meaning is completely different. It's really a mistake. I'm ashamed. Thank you for pointing it out. Chapter 8:21. A group of girls were having a good time at the entrance of the Desangxian Gate. This street had almost become their territory. On weekdays, this street was full of tourists. Even after 9 o'clock in the evening, there was still a sea of people, jostling each other's shoulders. How could it be as empty as it was today, where horses could run? These days, the little foxes had been cooped up at home for a long time. After coming out, they were like prisoners, laughing wildly. They were all teenage girls, and this time they were having fun. The street was really full of them, especially some little girls who were holding firecrackers and setting them off, laughing so hard that their noses and eyes disappeared. Li Yundong and the others didn't know what they were so happy about, but they were all having fun. In particular, the little foxes were having a lot of fun. Some of them simply played some tricks, such as turning into some small objects or playing some camouflage. The girls of Tiannan University stared at them with their eyes wide open, thinking that they were all female versions of Lu Qian. The little foxes were having a good time, but Su Chan still couldn't play. She looked at the little foxes playing. Although there was a smile on her face, there was still some depression between her brows. She was in a daze when she suddenly felt that someone was standing beside her. Su Chan turned her head and saw that Li Yundong was looking at her with a smile. "Are you still thinking about your master?" Su Chan shook her head with a sweet smile and said, "No, I'm wondering if anyone will come to pay us a New Year's visit today." Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. "Don't think about it. We have so many enemies now. It's good enough that they don't come to make trouble for us." Su Chan pouted. She put her arm around Li Yundong and said with a sigh, "Yundong, do you think I'm too greedy?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "What's wrong?" Su Chan raised her head, looked at him, and said, "In the past, when we were at our poorest, I thought that it would be good to have a place to live. But then the house we lived in got bigger and better, and I thought if we could only earn a little more money for ourselves. Now that we have started to make money, I hope that more and more people will come to congratulate us, praise us, and especially I hope that they will all recognize you as an indomitable hero. That would be great. Tell me, am I being too greedy?" Li Yundong laughed. "Who cares what others think? As long as you're happy now, isn't that good?" Su Chan looked at him in a daze and shook her head. "No, my biggest hope is to see you become a great hero. This is also the vow I made at the beginning. Now, I think you are already one, but I don't know what other people think." Li Yundong pinched the tip of the little girl's nose affectionately. "If you think I am, then I am. Who cares what others do?" Su Chan shook her head. "It's not that simple. How many people in this world can ignore what other people think?" The little girl had been thinking a lot these days. She had become more and more aware that the Fox Zen sect was a heavy burden to Li Yundong. Li Yundong could have become a great hero in the Chinese cultivation world, but because of the Fox Zen sect, his reputation had been more or less affected. Many cultivators of all sects were unwilling to admit that the person in charge of the Fox Zen sect was a great hero. This thought had been entangled in the little girl's heart for a long time, and it made her more and more unhappy. The little girl pouted, lowered her head, and muttered with flagging interest, "It's all our fault. Otherwise, why didn't anyone come to visit us during the New Year?" Li Yundong looked at her, and for some reason, his heart ached a little. He smiled, winked at Su Chan, and said, "Don't be sad. Watch me perform a magic trick, and in a while, a lot of people will come to pay their New Year's greetings. Do you believe me?" Su Chan knew that Li Yundong was spoiling her, and she couldn't help but feel warm in her heart. The little girl lowered her head, and there was a faint smile on the corner of her mouth. She shook her head gently and said, "I don't believe it." Li Yundong chuckled and took out a purple three-legged cauldron from his arms. He said in a loud voice, "Boys, come here." When the little foxes heard Li Yundong's call, they all shouted and ran toward him. When Ziyuan and Zhou Qin saw him with his hands on his hips and his arms raised, these little demons immediately gathered together. This situation was really like a scene from the Journey to the West. Ziyuan couldn't help but tease him. "Are you the Golden Horn King or the Silver Horn King?" Li Yundong laughed and raised the tripod in his hand. I'm the three-legged king. Zhou Qin didn't know what to think of, but her expression was a little strange. She couldn't help glancing at Li Yundong's lower body. The three-legged king? Li Yundong saw that her expression was strange, and the corners of her mouth seemed to be holding back a smile. Especially when he saw that her eyes kept sweeping over his lower body, he glared at her and said, "What are you thinking about? It's the new year. Can you stop thinking about it?" Zhou Qin quickly turned her face away. When she turned her face again, her face was already serious. Li Yundong turned his head to Feng Na and said, "Bring the best tea in our shop." Feng Na saw that Li Yundong was holding a three-legged purple copper cauldron in his hand. The copper cauldron was beautifully carved from top to bottom, like an antique. At first glance, she could tell that it was not an ordinary item. Although she didn't know what Li Yundong was going to do, she quickly turned into the back room, took out a beautiful ceramic jar, and took out a small bag of tea from it. She smiled and said, "This is the new Mount Huangshan. Although it's not as good as the one in Ziyuan's collection, it's still top grade. It costs more than 1,000 taels." Li Yundong smiled and took the tea in her hand. He poured all the tea into the tripod, and then asked her to fetch water. After a while, Feng Na brought clean water and handed it to Li Yundong. Li Yundong casually poured the cold water into the tripod. At this time, Feng Na, Ching Cheng, and the girls working in the shop all looked at Li Yundong curiously, not knowing what he was going to do. Some of the girls had specially learned a lot of tea-making skills in the past few days, so they more or less knew some methods and processes of tea-making. When they saw Li Yundong's behavior, they felt that it was really a bit of a waste of the top-grade Mount Huangshan. But since Li Yundong was the boss, and he had made a big profit before, naturally no one had any doubts. Only Ziyuan, Zhou Qin, and other cultivators vaguely understood what Li Yundong was going to do. At this time, Li Yundong smiled and blinked at Su Chan, saying, "Watch carefully. I'm sure someone will come to pay us a New Year's greeting later." Su Chan also somewhat guessed what Li Yundong was going to do. She looked at Li Yundong curiously and pursed her lips into a smile. "Really?" Li Yundong chuckled and stood up in the hall on the first floor. He held the three-legged copper tripod with both hands, and the jinqi in his body surged secretly. The jinqi in his palm gradually rose, and after a while, the tripod began to emit bursts of white smoke. As soon as the white smoke came out, a fragrant smell immediately came into the tea house. Everyone was shocked. The girls and the little foxes couldn't help but exclaim, "Oh, why is it so fragrant? This is the fragrance of Mount Huangshan." But soon, one of them shook her head and said, "No, it's even more fragrant than Mount Huangshan. I've never smelled anything so fragrant." The fragrance of Mount Huang was light and elegant, with an ethereal air. It was said to be an immortal tea. The King Cauldron was the personal magic weapon of Sun Simiao, the Tang dynasty's medical sage. For more than 1,000 years, it was unknown how many miraculous elixirs had been cooked in the cauldron. Although these miraculous elixirs had long been out of the furnace, most of the residual fragrance remained in the cauldron. Besides, after 1,000 years of edification and countless elixirs, even a stubborn stone could be smoked into an immortal stone, let alone a psychic magic weapon. The jinqi in Li Yundong's body was the rare yuanyang qi of a boy in the world. In terms of purity, it was unparalleled in the world. He mobilized his jinqi to roast the tripod, and the fragrance of the tripod, as well as the fragrance of the tea of Mount Huangshan, were immediately released. When these scents blended together, it was really a strange fragrance, which was shocking. Everyone saw that the tea in the tripod in Li Yundong's hand was not boiling, but there was a steady stream of white smoke coming out. This white smoke rose and slowly condensed into a white mist, and then spread out in all directions and out of the tea house. Today was the first day of the new year, and few people went shopping at this time, and many shops were closed. But not all shops were closed, and there were people on the pedestrian street. When the customers in these shops smelled the fragrance, they were shocked. Their nostrils twitched, and they exclaimed, "It's so fragrant, so fragrant." Where does this fragrance come from? Why is it so fragrant? This smell was not only fragrant, but after smelling it, they felt refreshed, their limbs were light, and their internal organs seemed to be much more comfortable, just like the chi of an immortal. Some people immediately followed the fragrance. After a while, all the tourists on the pedestrian street were alarmed by the fragrance and came to the Desanxian with curiosity and shock. At first, these people were only in twos and threes, but gradually, more and more people gathered together like a flood. Even some shop owners and shop assistants were tempted by the fragrance. They closed their shops one after another and followed the crowd curiously. This group of people followed the fragrance to the Desanxian. When they fixed their eyes on it, they saw that the antique tea house with flying eaves and arches was shrouded in a cloud of white mist, as if it was a fairyland on earth. At this time, coupled with the strange fragrance, which was intoxicating, they were all shocked. Some people who had never been here could not help but exclaim, "There is such a place on the pedestrian street? What kind of place is this?" Some people who knew immediately became curious. "Hey, you don't know, right? This is the most popular tea house in Tiannan City now. It's called the Desanxian. The tea inside is fragrant and good, and the tea attendants are beautiful and docile." Tut, tut. Those who had not seen the tea attendants in the Desanxian did not think much of these beautiful tea attendants for a while. They only felt the fragrance coming from the tea house, and they all thought at the same time, after drinking the tea in this tea house, will I become an immortal? Even if I can't become an immortal, it must be good to prolong my life. Immediately, some tourists shouted, "This tea house is open today. Let's go and get some tea." The crowd suddenly burst into laughter and rushed to the entrance of the Desanxian. They rushed to the entrance, only to see a handsome man standing at the entrance, holding a three-legged bronze tripod in his hands, looking at them with a smile. This man had an extraordinary bearing. Although he did not say a word, he had a different kind of majesty, so they did not dare to offend him easily. For a moment, the noisy street became quiet. Many people were shocked by Li Yundong's majesty and didn't know what to say for a while, but some people hid in the crowd and said boldly, "Boss, Happy New Year. What's so fragrant? Is it tea? Can you share a cup with us?" With someone taking the lead, everyone immediately followed suit. They all said with a smile, "Yes, Happy New Year. Let's have a cup of tea." Li Yundong couldn't help but laugh. He turned to Su Chan and blinked. "Did you see that? Are there a lot of people coming to pay us a New Year's greeting?" Chapter 822. Hearing Li Yundong's words, many people understood that Li Yundong had made such a big noise just to make Su Chan happy. Except for Li Yundong, the rest of the Desanxian were all women. They all looked at Su Chan enviously, wishing that there was such a man who could coax and pamper them like this. Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin looked at each other and shook their heads in their hearts. Zhou Qin felt a little sour in her heart, so she changed the topic and whispered, "This is a good opportunity for publicity." However, Zi Yuan fixed her eyes on Li Yundong and said, "If he becomes the emperor, he must be a guy like King Yu of Zhou. In order to make a girl happy, he can also do things like burning a beacon to tease the feudal vassals." Zhou Qin looked at Li Yundong and sighed faintly. "Yes, but who is Bao Si?" Zi Yuan immediately glanced at Zhou Qin and felt a little strange in her heart. Meishi in the Xia dynasty, Daji in the Shang dynasty, Bao Si in the Zhou dynasty, and Liji in the spring and autumn period were the four great foxes recognized by China since ancient times. They were also known as the four enchantresses. Zhou Qin's words were very appropriate for the occasion and had a deep meaning. Zhou Qin saw Zi Yuan looking at her meaningfully, and she also came to her senses. She quickly waved her hand and said, "I just said it casually. I don't mean anything else. Don't think too much about it." Zi Yuan smiled and didn't say anything. She just thought to herself, "I hope Zhou Qin's words don't come true." At this time, there was a lot of noise outside the tea house. These people were all attracted by the strange fragrance and wanted to ask for a cup of tea. Li Yundong turned his head and said to Su Chan with a smile, "Do you want to give it to me?" When Su Chan saw that Li Yundong had made such a big noise for her, she felt really sweet in her heart. She was moved and guilty at the same time. She said with some fear, "Yundong, this is not good, is it?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "What's wrong with it? Nothing is more important than your happiness." Su Chan's eyes were immediately filled with tears. She stared at Li Yundong and didn't know what to say. Li Yundong looked at Su Chan gently and said with a smile, "Don't be silly. Say something. We're all waiting for you." Only then did Su Chan wipe her tears and break into a smile. Of course. It's the new year today." Li Yundong chuckled and turned to Feng Na. "Set up a long table and bring a row of teacups." Feng Na glanced at Su Chan enviously, then turned around and left. At this time, the girls in the shop did not wait for her instructions. One by one, they put the tea table together and placed small teacups on it. Li Yundong held the Medicine King tripod with one hand, tilted it slightly, and poured the tea in the tripod into the teacup. Everyone could see that the copper tripod in his hand weighed at least 20 to 30 kilograms, but Li Yundong lifted it with one hand as if it were light. Although he was pouring tea at an angle, and there was no spout on the tripod stove, he did not spill a drop of water on the table, showing his extremely brilliant kung fu. The people outside the building were all amateurs of cultivation. Although they couldn't understand Li Yundong's kung fu, as the saying goes, amateurs were just watching the fun. Li Yundong poured the tea in a row, and his movements were as smooth as flowing water. There was no delay at all, and he was extremely elegant. The crowd suddenly cheered, and Li Yundong also said with a smile, "Come on, everyone has a cup. Everyone who sees it has a share." The girls of Desanxian, who had just turned into the official members, immediately carried tea trays and brought tea to the crowd. All of them were smiling and talking. The delicate fragrance of the girls seemed to blend with the fragrance of the tea, making people more and more intoxicated. After everyone took the teacups, they saw that they were the smallest teacups, which could only hold one tael of tea at most. It was okay to take a sip, but if they were thirsty and drank it all at once, it would not be enough to quench their thirst. However, there was a faint green color in the clear tea, which made people think that it was immortal tea. Some people couldn't bear it and didn't care about their faces. They raised their heads and drank the tea as if they were drinking white wine. Although the amount was small, the tea was made with Huangshan Maofeng as a guide, and Li Yundong used his boy Yuanyang Qi to drive the Medicine King tripod to refine it. Among the three, although the high-grade Huangshan Maofeng could be bought, Li Yundong's boy Yuanyang Qi and the peerless immortal Qi of the Medicine King tripod could not be bought with money. When the three of them were combined into one, the tea that was brewed was truly wondrous. It was equivalent to everyone taking a miraculous elixir. As soon as some people drank it, they immediately felt that the tea was comfortable and refreshing in their throats. A strange force spread around their bodies, making their limbs light, their minds clear, and their bodies light, as if they were going to float like immortals. Some people had a big reaction and couldn't help but burst into tears. They immediately choked and said, "This is really immortal tea. I've never drunk such delicious tea." Those who hadn't drunk the tea looked at these people with tears streaming down their faces in surprise, as if they were looking at crazy people. They said, "F***ck, is it so exaggerated?" They immediately squeezed to the front, stretched out their arms, and shouted, "I want to drink it too, I want to drink it too." For a moment, the entrance of the Desanxian was crowded, and the deserted street suddenly became crowded. Feng Na saw so many people crowded at the door, all stretching out their arms and shouting. It was really noisy, and their arms were like a forest. She was a little stunned. Even when the business of the Desanxian was at its best, there had never been such a scene. She had only seen such a scene in some large supermarkets when there was a discount. A group of people, men and women, old and young, were squeezing in like a suicide squad. But the situation in front of her was even more exaggerated than that of a supermarket. No matter how much discount the supermarket offered, it would still cost money. But right now, it was free. Although there were many tea shops these days that invited beautiful tea waitresses to serve passers-by on the road with tea trays, those fragrant tea were good, but how could they have such a magical effect? Just smelling it made them feel refreshed, as if they were a few years younger. Although they didn't know the origin of the tripod in Li Jiandong's hand, nor did they know who he was, they only felt that such immortal tea could not be drunk even if they spent money on it. If they didn't take advantage of this opportunity to have a good taste today, wouldn't it be a great loss? After drinking the tea, some of these people opened their mouths and praised him. Even if some people were rebellious in their hearts and wanted to express different feelings from the others, after drinking this cup of tea, their minds immediately became gloomy and their bodies became tipsy. It was as if they had been reborn. Their ears and eyes were sharp, and they were in high spirits. Even if they had 100 complaints in their hearts, they were too embarrassed to go against their conscience and say such things. After drinking the tea, the praise spread. Some people even immediately picked up their mobile phones and told their families to come here quickly to taste the rare immortal tea in this world. Some people who hadn't drunk the tea were so anxious that they jumped up and down and raised their arms high, for fear that the tea waitress would miss them. As they jumped, they squeezed to the front, making the group of people at the door like a torrent, wave after wave. Seeing that the group of people at the door refused to leave after drinking the tea, Feng Na looked at Li Jiandong eagerly, hoping that he would give them another cup of tea. More people rushed over after hearing the news, blocking the street tightly. The scene was much more lively than when the Desanxian opened for business. At this time, there was such a big noise on the pedestrian street. It didn't take long for the police of the security team to arrive. They originally wanted to disperse the crowd, but when they saw Li Yundong in the crowd, someone immediately recognized him. F***CK, isn't that the one in that community? Li Yundong asked. Even Chief Gong is very polite to him. Normally, if someone had made such a scene, the police of the public security brigade might have rushed over, arrested him first, and then sued him for disturbing public order and affecting social order. They would have fined him thousands of yuan. But they recognized that Li Jiandong was in the scene, so no one dared to move. They had to obediently maintain order outside. Then, the reporters of the TV station also came after hearing the news. They wanted to squeeze in, but there was a sea of people here. It was difficult to even stick a needle in, let alone a person. If a burly man tried to squeeze in, he would be squeezed into the air with just a lift of his feet, unable to fall to the ground. The reporters of the TV station looked at the scene in front of them and immediately gasped. What's going on? Isn't this too exaggerated? But after smelling the fragrance of the tea, they felt that the situation seemed to be reasonable. They also wanted to squeeze in and have a cup to see what kind of magic this tea that could make everyone crazy was. These reporters couldn't squeeze into the crowd, so they had to set up cameras outside to report the grand occasion here. Imperceptibly, they had made a big free advertisement for Desanxian. Zi Yuan, Zhou Qin, and the others saw that Li Jiandong's playful act could cause such a sensation. They couldn't help but look at each other, sigh, and shake their heads with a smile. The girls in the shop were even more admiring. They thought that this was a deliberate move by Li Jiandong. He could please his girlfriend and promote the tea house at the same time. It was really killing two birds with one stone. On the first day of the new year, he could think of such a way in a flash. No wonder he was the boss and they were waiters. Li Jiandong saw that the crowd was getting more and more crowded. It was obvious that there were more monks than porridge, and more people than tea. He raised his hands and said, "Everyone, don't push. It's useless. There's only so much tea today. If you want to drink such immortal tea in the future, come to Desanxian. We will welcome you with open hands. Everyone, go back." The crowd suddenly sighed, and there was a lot of sorrow. Some people cursed unwillingly, while others immediately asked and the Desanxian would open and what the price of the tea was. They secretly made up their minds that they must come early tomorrow to drink this immortal tea. After Li Jiandong finished speaking, he turned around and went back to the tea house, but many people gathered in the tea house and refused to leave. They kept asking if the tea house would open today. Li Jiandong smiled and said, "It's not open today. Please go back and come back early tomorrow morning." Immediately, an old man asked, "How early do you want?" Li Jiandong chuckled and said, "Daybreak." Unexpectedly, the old man said, "Then I'll sleep here. I won't leave." The crowd burst into laughter. Someone made fun of him and said, "You're crazy. It's winter, but you're sleeping on the floor just to drink a cup of tea. Is it worth it?" However, the old man's eyes widened. He pointed to himself and said, "After drinking this tea just now, my eyes immediately lit up. My chest was tight and I was short of breath. My joints hurt, and I even trembled when I walked. But after drinking this cup of tea, my eyes immediately lit up. My chest was no longer tight, I was no longer short of breath, and my joints didn't hurt anymore." As he said this, he stamped his feet hard and said, "Now I feel full of strength, as if I'm 10 years younger. I spent a lot of money to treat my illnesses, but I didn't expect that I would be cured after drinking a cup of tea in Desanxian. Do you think it's worth it for me to stay here for the whole night?" Some of the crowd laughed and said, "It's worth it, of course it's worth it." There were also people who had not drunk the tea who shouted, "You must be a shill. Don't say it, how could it be so exaggerated? Who would believe it?" The old man suddenly became furious. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly heard the voice of a healthy old man not far away. "I believe it." Hearing this, everyone turned their heads and saw an old man with an extraordinary bearing standing outside the crowd. He was said to be an old man because his hair was white. But judging from his appearance, his eyes were sharp and full of spirit, and he looked like a middle-aged man. A knowledgeable reporter was shocked when he saw the old man. "It's him? Why is he here?" Chapter 823. This old man was none other than the tyrant of Tiannan City, Chen Wankai. Ever since he had been accepted as a disciple by Li Yundong, his health and mood had improved day by day. Moreover, Li Xiaoxian's health had improved greatly, and Shenhui had also withstood his test. It seemed that she was a successor who could be entrusted with heavy responsibilities. The pain of losing his son slowly faded away in Chen Wansai's heart, replaced by a strong desire to seek immortality. Especially after Chen Wankai carried out some basic breathing exercises according to Li Yundong's method, he found that his body was indeed getting more and more nourished, his muscles and bones were getting stronger and stronger, and his spirit, qi, and spirit had become much more abundant. Sometimes he walked as if he were flying, just like a young man. Chen Wankai had originally wanted to visit Li Yundong's house early in the morning and wish him a happy new year. However, when he arrived early in the morning, Li Yundong was no longer at home, and there was no one in the rooms on either side. Chen Wankai thought for a while and thought that Li Yundong and the others must be at Desanxian. Otherwise, it would be impossible for no one to be there, so he turned around and took Shenhui, who had come with him, straight to Desanxian. As soon as they arrived at Desanxian, Chen Wankai and Shenhui saw a dense crowd of people. It was a sea of people, which was scary to look at. They were all shocked. It was not until they heard Li Yundong's clear voice coming from the crowd that they knew what had happened. Chen Wankai had been in the business world for many years. With just a glance, he saw the benefits of this matter. He thought that Li Yundong had done it on purpose. He secretly admired him in his heart, so he smiled and said to Shenhui, "Fortunately, my young master was not born a few years earlier." Shenhui was also in a good mood these days. When she saw her father's rare smile, she asked, "Why did you say that he was not born a few years earlier?" Chen Wankai laughed and said, "If he had been born a few years earlier, there would have been no chance for me to make a name for myself in the business world." Shenhui smiled. There are different levels of knowledge, and different professions. Everyone has their own talents. Chen Wankai glanced at her and suddenly asked, "Do you think there's anything my master can't do?" Shenhui was speechless when she heard that. She thought about it carefully. Ever since she got to know this guy, it seemed that nothing was difficult for him. During the tea art competition, she had set him up, but this guy was still able to break free from the trap, pull a tooth out of a tiger's mouth, and take first place. Shenhui thought about this and couldn't help but sigh. Sigh, people can't be compared with each other. Chen Wankai chuckled, as if he was extremely proud of his own judgment. As the father and daughter were talking, they heard an old man arguing with someone in the crowd. After listening for a while, Chen Wankai could not help but stand up for his master. When Li Yundong heard his voice, he looked over and said with a smile, "Old Shen, you're here?" Chen Wankai cupped his hands to Li Yundong from afar and walked toward him. He was an old and sophisticated man with an extraordinary bearing. At first glance, one could tell that he was not an ordinary person. The others were deterred by his bearing and made way for him and Shenhui to walk in. After Li Yundong accepted Chen Wankai as his disciple, it was naturally not appropriate for him to call him Mr. Shen. That would be too distant, but it was also not appropriate for him to call him by his name. Although there was no age difference in learning, and the one who was more than enough to be his father, and his experience and seniority were there, Li Yundong compromised and called him Old Shen. Li Yundong was polite to Chen Wankai, but Chen Wankai did not dare to be careless. After he stepped forward, he respectfully knelt on the ground and called him master. According to the rules, he had to kowtow to his master. When the crowd saw that such a person was kowtowing to a 20-year-old boy, there was an uproar. They all looked at Li Yundong in shock and thought to themselves, "This boy looks so young, but he is the master of this old man. Who on earth is he?" Li Yundong quickly supported Chen Wankai, who was about to kneel, and said with a smile, "Old Shen, don't be like this. It's the New Year's Day, and will be laughed at by outsiders. You came at the right time today. Hurry up and taste the immortal tea that I made myself. You can't drink it normally." After Chen Wankai got up, he turned to Su Chan and said with a smile, "Hello, ma'am." Su Chan immediately pursed her lips and smiled shyly. Her eyes narrowed into a line, and her beautiful eyebrows curved like crescent moons. After Chen Wankai greeted Su Chan, he greeted Lin Miao, who was next to him. He bowed and said with a smile, "Shiji, Happy New Year." Although Lin Miao had spent the Spring Festival with her grandmother in the United States before, she had never seen such a lively occasion. She looked on from the side and felt that everything was new. She was a little confused, but when she heard Chen Wankai call her Shiji in public, she immediately blushed and didn't know what to do. Zhou Qin pursed her lips slightly and said in a low voice, "Return the greeting." "What are you waiting for?" Only then did Lin Miao calm down and bow in return. Everyone saw that she was a young foreign girl with blonde hair and blue eyes, but she was the Shiji of an old man with white hair and a ruddy face. Obviously, she was also the female disciple of the young man. They suddenly felt more and more strange, wondering what the origin of this strange combination was. After Lin Miao and Chen Wankai greeted each other, Chen Wankai politely greeted the people in the shop one by one. Then he said to Li Yunyang with a smile, "Master, there's no hurry to drink tea. Let me make it clear to this person first." As he said this, he turned to the person who had said that he didn't believe that Li Yunyang's tea had magical effects and said, "I guess you don't know me, but it doesn't matter. Last year, when I participated in the Tea Culture Art Challenge tournament in Dongwu City, do you know who won first place?" Everyone asked curiously, "Who was it?" "It can't be this male boss, right?" Chen Wankai smiled slightly, pointed to Zi Yuan beside him, and said with a smile, "No, it's this one. This is a fairy in the world. Her tea art is extraordinary." At that time, 8 immortals crossed the sea at the same time and won first place. But even such a fairy doesn't dare to say that she can make such immortal tea. "Fairy Zi Yuan, is it true or not?" Zi Yuan knew that Chen Wankai wanted to build momentum for his master, so he used her as a foil. She smiled cooperatively and said concisely, "Yes." Everyone saw that Zi Yuan was an outstanding beauty. She stood there as if she was going to fly away with the wind and become an immortal. She was really full of the charm of an immortal, and her every move was full of the demeanor of a goddess. Although it was just a word, it had a kind of incomparably convincing power, and people couldn't help but believe it. The person who had questioned them before was shocked by the temperament of Zi Yuan and Qin Wankai. Even if he was dissatisfied, he couldn't say anything at this time, but his eyes were still full of doubts. Qin Wankai smiled and said to Zi Yuan, "Fairy Zi Yuan, would you like to show off your skills?" Zi Yuan smiled gently and glanced at Li Yundong. "With Zhenren Li here, how dare I show off my slight skill in front of an expert?" Qin Wankai then said to Li Yundong, "Master, can you show off your skills in front of everyone today and let us broaden our horizons?" Li Yundong took a deep look at Qin Wankai, hesitated for a moment, then nodded with a smile and said, "Okay." Compared with Zi Yuan, his tea art was definitely on the ground and in the sky. They were not on the same level at all, but if it was just to concoct some spectacular and magical scenes, Zi Yuan was not as good as him. At this time, Li Yundong placed the Medicine King tripod on the tea table. He pressed one hand on one side of the copper tripod and the other on the Medicine King tripod, silently activating the Zhenqi in his body. Everyone saw that the white mist in the Medicine King tripod suddenly changed from an irregular cloud to a tangible shape. Slowly, they recognized that there was a faintly moving dragon in the white mist. This dragon had a nose, eyes, and beard, and if they got close enough, they could even see the scales on it. Some people who saw it clearly couldn't help but exclaim, "Damn, is it a dragon? No way." At this time, more and more people saw it clearly and exclaimed one after another. The reporters of the TV station also looked at the scene in front of them with their mouths agape and tongue-tied. For a moment, they forgot to take a picture. After a while, they regretted it and turned on the camera. Li Yunyang controlled the divine dragon to fly back and forth in the fog. Sometimes it rolled through the white fog that surrounded the beams, and sometimes it twisted the universe in the Medicine King tripod that was rolling in the white fog. Everyone was stunned, dazzled, and speechless for a long time. The crowd watched as the indistinct dragon swam around for a while before it suddenly drilled into the many teacups on the tea table. With a whoosh, the dragon instantly turned into countless wisps of white mist and dissipated into the tea in the cups. Those who were close by gathered their courage and came forward to take a look. They saw that the tea in the teacups were rippling, as if a divine dragon had just drilled into it. If Li Yundong explained the effects and characteristics of these teas to them, no one would believe him. However, after he pretended to be mysterious, everyone immediately believed him and determined that this tea was immortal tea. This time, de Sanxian was even more shocked. Those who had not left immediately felt extremely lucky. Fortunately, they had not left. Otherwise, how could they have seen such a wonderful scene? At this time, everyone was scrambling to have a taste of this tea, but Qin Wankai turned to Li Yundong and said, "Master, please let me say a few words, can you?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Old Qin, please." Qin Wankai nodded, turned around and said loudly, "Don't rush, everyone. Answer my question first. If you answer it, everyone will have a share of this tea." When everyone heard this, they calmed down a little and pricked up their ears to listen to him. Qin Wankai raised a cup of tea and said loudly, "Everyone, what kind of tea is this? Whoever can answer it, let him drink a cup." For a moment, everyone was talking at once. Some said that it was Taiping Monkey King, some said that it was Taiguanin, and some said that it was Westlake Longjing. There were many different opinions, but Qin Wankai kept shaking his head with a smile. Even when someone said that this tea was Huangshan Maofeng, he just smiled and said nothing. For a moment, Li Yundong, Su Chan, Zi Yuan, and the others didn't know what he was up to. They all looked at each other. However, Shen Hui understood Qin Wansai's thoughts. She suddenly shouted, "This is the best tea in the world." Her voice was not loud in the crowd, but a clever person next to her heard it and immediately shouted, "This is the best tea in the world." Qin Wankai immediately brought the tea to the person and said with a smile, "By the way, please have some tea." Chapter 824. That night, when some evening news on the TV station broadcasted the amazing spectacle of the opening of Desanxian in the new year, Desanxian became popular, and so did the title of the world's #1 tea house. A tea-drinking trend was set off in Tiannan City. For a time, almost every household took tea drinking as a fashion and talked about Desanxian as a trending topic. Even many wealthy businessmen in the surrounding cities were alarmed and specially drove to Desanxian in Tiannan City to buy first-grade immortal tea. Bubble. Book. ******. Although the Japanese had driven the business of Desanxian to boom, Li Yundong, Feng Na, and the others knew very well that it was impossible for the Japanese to visit Desanxian from thousands of miles away all the time. Even if the Yamaguchi people were devout, they also had to support their families. The people who mingled in the underworld also had to earn hard-earned money. No family had much spare money. It was already pious enough for them to come all the way to the immovable Wisdom King's shop to drink tea and worship the gods. They couldn't destroy their homes to worship Buddha. How many Japanese tourists came to China every year? There were only tens of thousands of Yamaguchi people in Japan. Those who could afford to come were 1 in 100, and these Japanese tourists who came to Tiannan City were 1 in 1,000. Therefore, if they only relied on the Japanese to support the business and financial resources of Desanxian, it would not be a long-term solution. Therefore, they could only tap into the market in Tiannan City. On a whim, Li Yundong inadvertently created a huge gimmick. With the secret help of all kinds of opportunities and various forces, Desanxian's reputation rose. It was no longer limited to the pedestrian street. For a time, it became a household name in Tiannan City, known to all women and children. At this time, Li Yundong also knew that the expansion plan of Desanxian had matured, and they could take a step forward. This was just a small step, and they had only opened another branch in Tiannan City. For the time being, Su Chan and the little foxes would be in charge of it. But everything was difficult at the beginning. The first branch had been opened, and the second and third branches would probably appear soon in the future. In the end, Desanxian would go out of the country and go to the world. There was an effect in the business world called the snowball effect or the flywheel effect. It referred to the accumulation of capital at the beginning. The accumulation of capital was the most difficult. It was like a person spinning a huge roulette. At the beginning, it was extremely strenuous and exhausting. However, once the difficulty of the initial stage was over, the snowball would roll bigger and bigger, thus creating a huge inertia. The flywheel would also roll faster and faster, and the person pushing it would save more and more effort. In the end, there was no need to push it at all, and it would spin quickly on its own. This was the nature of capital interests. It would constantly look for fresh blood to strengthen itself. Just like what Zhou Qin had said to Ding Nan in the school building, "It's not that I'm vicious, but that the power behind me is too great." Power is like a beast. The stronger it is, the more it wants to eat people. The more harm anyone gives it, the greater its rebound. This is not something I can control. Everything in the world is the same. Whether it is business, politics, or cultivation, putting aside the superficial phenomenon and looking at the essence, in fact, the truth is the same. This is the true meaning of all things returning to the root. As long as you master this root, no matter how dazzling or changing everything in the world is, you can never escape the essence of this root. There were a lot of people in China. Whenever a business made a little money, there would be countless people rushing into that business until the business was full. Then, there would be countless people losing everything. Only then would the jealous people calm down a little. Li Yundong's Desanxian became famous and quickly attracted the attention of the business community in Tiannan City. Although many of them knew that Li Yundong had a great background in Zhou Qin's amazing power, they did not dare to use some dirty means to deal with this business star, but they still dared to compete with him in some reasonable business competitions. Besides, the theory of capital was right. Once there was a proper profit, capital would be bold. If there was a 10% profit, it would be guaranteed to be used everywhere. If there was a 20% profit, it would be active. If there was a 50% profit, it would be desperate. if there was a 100% profit, it would be able to trample on all human laws. If there was a 300% profit, it would dare to commit any crime, even at the risk of being hanged. When Li Yundong opened the first tea shop of Desanxian, he had invested no more than 1 million yuan in the beginning, but in less than a month, his turnover almost broke through an astonishing 8 figures. Even after deducting the labor costs and costs, the profit was as high as an astonishing 800%. Such a sudden appearance of a high-profit industry instantly made many businessmen dizzy. Soon, many tea houses imitating Desanxian began to appear one by one. Some people were even like Xiao Yuzhen, setting up a tea house in front of the branch of Desanxian and fighting in the arena. All kinds of tea art activities were held in the city all day long. Some exaggerated ones even had clones of names. For a time, Tian San Xian, Di San Xian, and so on swarmed up. It was really chaotic, which made Li Yundong, Su Chan, and the others not know whether to laugh or cry. However, no matter how many people followed the trend and how outrageous the tricks were, none of them was Li Yundong. After all, they didn't have the Medicine King tripod, so it was impossible for them to make immortal tea that could make people fascinated and intoxicated. Sometimes people were very stupid, but sometimes they were terrifyingly shrewd. At first, these tea houses attracted many customers with low prices and a lot of gimmicks, but after drinking a few times, they soon found out, what the hell is this? Are you kidding me? This tea is far worse than immortal tea. Although Li Yundong no longer showed his face and used the Medicine King tripod to perform tea art, he also came up with a wonderful idea. He first placed the tea leaves in the Medicine King tripod, absorbed some of the medicinal power and spiritual qi accumulated by the Medicine King tripod for thousands of years, and then sold them at a very high price. In this way, the tea house grading system that Zhou Qin had started could finally be implemented. The Desanxian began to officially introduce several modified cards, namely, Human Immortal, Earth Immortal, and Fairy Immortal, which corresponded to the name of the shop. They were also divided into 3 levels. Although the consumption mode was no different from other consumption modes, after the design of Zi Yuan and Wan Hongling, the workmanship of these cards was exquisite. Even the lowest level, Human Immortal, card was extremely exquisite. The pattern on it was a beautiful fairy dressed in antique silk and satin, concentrating on performing tea art. At the 4 corners of the card were flying auspicious clouds. The colors were bright and 3-dimensional. When held in the hand, it was really like a small work of art, which made people unable to put it down. With the Human Immortal card, it meant that the tea guests were already primary members of the Desanxian. They were qualified to enjoy most of the tea of the Desanxian and enjoy discounts. The Earth Immortal card was a valiant portrait of Lu Yu, the god of tea, with a feather fan and silk scarf. At the 4 corners of the card were green mountains and blue waters, full of poetry, like a beautiful picture. However, if someone looked carefully, they would find that the portrait of Lu Yu drawn by Zi Yuan was actually somewhat similar to Li Yundong. Unlike the issuance of the Human Immortal card, the Earth Immortal card could only be issued after a certain level of consumption had been accumulated. After the implementation of the card level system of the Desanxian, thousands of Human Immortal cards had been issued. There were also many wealthy businessmen who came to drink the fairy tea. In order to drink the fairy tea, they spent a lot of money and directly smashed the Human Immortal card into an Earth Immortal card. However, to their disappointment, although the Earth Immortal card could allow them to drink most of the fairy tea and enter the box on the 2nd floor, they still could not enter the most luxurious box, the Fairy Immortal, nor could they drink the fairy tea. If they wanted to upgrade to the Fairy Immortal card, it was useless to just spend money. In order not to let the fairy tea of the Desanxian become a victim of rich businessmen showing off their wealth, and thus make the Desanxian stink of money, Li Yundong, Feng Na, and the others discussed and decided to set a consumption limit. That was, after reaching this limit, they would be qualified to apply for the Fairy Immortal card, but no matter how much money they spent, they would not be able to add more points to this person. This qualification was only one aspect. The other aspect was that they had to have some understanding of tea culture. Therefore, they had to face the questions about tea culture from the most beautiful tea lady in the tea house. Only if they could answer them could they be qualified to enter the fairy immortal tea house. This made these businessmen confused. This was the first time they had encountered such a thing where they couldn't get anything done with money, especially these beautiful tea ladies. The questions were not only rare, but also tricky and strange. Even the experienced tea gluttons might not know. The most important thing was that it was not easy for them to go back and figure out the problem. When they came back again, the tea lady had changed the question. This is AF * king trap. Some of the ill-tempered businessmen suddenly flew into a rage, but the tea ladies were also very professional. With smiles on their faces, they did not say a word of rebuttal. Although these businessmen were angry and depressed, they also knew the background of this tea house more or less. Naturally, they did not dare to be presumptuous. They just complained in their mouths and stomachs, and they still went back to study the knowledge of tea culture. Every time some rich businessmen returned in anger, they made up their minds not to go to this deceptive Desanxian again. However, when they saw Shen Wankai, who often appeared in a high-profile manner in some banquet venues, they had no choice but to go back and become students one by one. Some even specially invited a knowledgeable tea master to tutor them. What a joke! They were all so poor that they only had money left. Who didn't want to live a few more years? Who didn't want to have a healthier body? Look at Mr. Shen. Now his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. When I saw him a month ago, I thought he was going to be buried. This was all for the immortal tea. Moreover, according to Mr. Shen, he has recently been rejuvenated. The doctor said that he actually has the ability to have children again. Even the treasured saber is not old, and it is even more heroic than before. What the hell, how old is this old man Shen? How can he still carry a spear and ride a horse like this? The rich businessmen were all dumbfounded. They didn't believe it from the bottom of their hearts, but looking at Shen Wansai's extremely energetic appearance, they had no choice but to believe it. Speaking of which, cultivators all cultivated the internal organs, so the pills refined were all aimed at the internal organs, or for conditioning, nourishing, or consolidating. Sometimes, men's combat effectiveness was not strong, mostly because their bodies were deficient, and their essence, qi, blood, and qi were seriously insufficient. In the end, it led to a major deficiency of the liver and kidney, and the weakening of yang qi. Although the immortal tea was only soaked in the medicine king tripod for a while, the spiritual qi absorbed was enough to improve the weakness of the 5 internal organs and the lack of essence, qi, and blood. Therefore, drinking the immortal tea did have such a magical effect. Especially when a rich businessman was lucky and suddenly got the answer of the tea lady, he got what he wanted and successfully upgraded to a celestial immortal card. After tasting the immortal tea smoothly, he suddenly seemed to have been reborn. That night, he went back to find his young wife and had sex with her 3 times. The next day, he was triumphant and bragged to everyone he met. Although these rich businessmen ridiculed and didn't believe it on the surface, they believed it in private. One by one, they scratched their ears and cheeks and crazily studied the tea culture. When the rich businessman, who was the first to taste the immortal tea, was about to drink it again a few days later, he was told, "Sorry, dear customer, the celestial immortal card can only be consumed once. After consuming it once, it will automatically be downgraded to an earthly immortal card. You have to answer my question again and pass before you can drink it again." At this moment, the rich businessman really burst into tears. He even had the thought of burning down the tea house. This is really too deceitful. But even though he was deceitful and angry, after crying, no matter how resentful he was, he still went back and continued to study the tea culture honestly. Especially for someone like him who had tasted the sweetness of the tea, he couldn't stop. For a time, a strange tea culture trend was set off in the upper class of Tiannan City and the surrounding cities. These rich people talked about tea when they saw people, as if they would be out of the game if they didn't talk. Under such circumstances, the Desanxian developed rapidly. After Li Yunyang and the others spent the spring festival, they soon ushered in the 2 solar terms of the spring equinox and the rain. Time passed day by day, and the date came to the most important period of the year for cultivators, the waking of insects. Chapter 825. In the inner hall of the Yin-Yang sect on Mount Wuhua. This was a huge and spacious grotto, surrounded by mahogany shelves with all kinds of books and dazzling medicine bottles. This grotto faced south and was extremely deep. It was a cultivation treasure land that Jing Yuan had spent a lot of effort to find and build. Although there were many twists and turns inside, there was a hole in the front and 3 exits in different directions at the back. It could be said that a cunning rabbit had 3 burrows. The front and back of this grotto were ventilated, and there was a natural hole above it. This hole almost went straight to the top of the mountain, where the blue sky could be seen with the naked eye. Moreover, Jing Yuan had set up a sophisticated magic circle on the hole above his head, which could only be used to exit but not to enter. If he was attacked from all sides, the Yang spirit could escape through this hole, but it was impossible for outsiders to use the Yang spirit to sneak in and attack him quietly. In this grotto, there was also a very deep pit on the ground, which had been dug by Jing Yuan in order to refine the Hell Wuzhang enchanting jade. It was not only densely covered with magic circles, but also piled up with corpses and medicine dregs. The Yin Qi was so strong that it was like hell. Jing Yuan had spent a lot of money and time on this cultivation mansion. It was an excellent cultivation treasure land. Not only did it seize the magical creation of heaven and earth, but it was also a unique and ingenious place. When cultivators cultivated in this grotto, there was a cave leading to the sky above their heads and a deep pit of Yin Qi under their feet. It could be said that it was connected to the 9th heaven and the 9th earth. In a breath, they could collect the Yin and Yang Qi of heaven and earth. The Yin-Yang sect was a big cultivation sect in the Chinese cultivation world since ancient times. Its origin was extremely ancient and could even be traced back to the Yellow Emperor himself. When the Yellow Emperor asked Qi Bo about the cultivation method, Qi Bo asked him to teach the Yellow Emperor the art of Yin and Yang. This was the origin of the Yin-Yang sect. The cultivators of the Yin-Yang sect had a doctrine and an unswerving concept of cultivation, which was that the reason why mortals were weak was that they were injured by the intersection of Yin and Yang. This meant that the reason why ordinary people were getting weaker was that they were injured by improper behavior in the intercourse of Yin and Yang. Therefore, the Yin-Yang sect took this as their fundamental doctrine and proposed that the reason why the saints were strong was because of the intersection of Yin and Yang. Although only a few words were changed, the meaning was completely different. The cultivators of the Yin-Yang sect believed that since ordinary people did not know the art of plucking, they would behave improperly during intercourse, resulting in injuries to the kidneys, body, and mind. In the end, their essence, qi, and spirit would be depleted. Quantitative change would lead to qualitative change, and the strong would slowly become weak. Then, the sages who knew how to cultivate could use the correct method to pluck the yin and yang during intercourse. So what is the right way? Zhang Ding, a Taoist priest of the Yin-Yang sect in the Tang dynasty, had written a cultivation classic called Dongxian Zi that had been passed down through the ages. This book was another classic of the Yin-Yang sect after the 8 trigram scripture, and it was still regarded as a supreme classic by the Yin-Yang sect. In this ancient book, it was stated that of all things in the world, only man is the most precious. A man's desire is the most important thing. Lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, yin and yang. Those who understood the truth would nourish their nature and prolong their life. Those who were slow would harm the life of heaven and earth. It meant that sexual intercourse should follow the laws of heaven and earth, and follow the principles of yin and yang. Only then could one prolong life and strengthen one's foundation. This kind of cultivation method was originally the truth of the world, and it was human nature. The Yin-Yang sect used to be strong for a time, but as a big tree has withered branches, during the Wei, Jin, and northern and southern dynasties, the Yin-Yang sect once bewitched the foolish people in the countryside, and raped them. For a time, the heavens were angry and the people resented them. The cultivation world rose up to attack them. Then, during the Taiwu Emperor of the Northern Wei dynasty, the Northern Celestial Master Taoist Ko Qianji initiated a reform of Taoism. He publicly abolished the sexual techniques of Taoism, and listed this cultivation method as forbidden. Anyone who cultivates this technique will be attacked by the whole world. After that, the Yin-Yang sect declined greatly. It was not until the Tang dynasty that the Tang people opened up and the Yin-Yang sect rose again. Only then did Zhang Ding write a book and publicize the way of Yin and Yang with the book Dongxianzi. For a time, the Yin-Yang sect was popular from the nobles and ministers to the common people. But unfortunately, at this time, the Fox Zen school rose. This group of fox spirits learned the Yin-Yang technique, which was really like adding wings to a tiger. They became more and more evil. Many cultivators couldn't control the word lust. They lost their essence and lost their vitality, fattening the cultivation of a group of fox spirits, and they themselves became medicine dregs. Such behavior of the Fox Zen school naturally angered the cultivation world. Especially after the appearance of the mystical silver fox, the Yin-Yang sect also took a lot of blame. After the cultivators of the cultivation world drove away the mystical silver fox, they turned around and launched a counterattack against the Yin-Yang sect, killing many masters of the Yin-Yang sect. After the Tang dynasty, the Yin-Yang sect could not recover until the Song, Yuan, and Ming dynasties. First, the Zhengyi school unified Jianghu, and then the Quanzhen sect rose. There was no place for the Yin-Yang sect in the cultivation world. Today, this super sect, which used to be, where there were people, there were cultivators of the Yin-Yang sect, had been reduced to a small sect struggling at death's door. Although Zheng Yuan was old, he had always been ambitious and had always been eager to revitalize the Yin-Yang sect. Therefore, he had been running this bleak sect. After decades of accumulation and development, he had dozens of disciples, had his own immortal mansion, and even refined the extremely domineering Hel Wuzhang enchanting jade. But all of this, with Ding Nan's killing of her master and seizing the position, everything had become a bubble. This was a great misfortune for Zheng Yuan, but it was a great blessing for an extremely ancient cultivation sect like the Yin-Yang sect. Although Ding Nan was a half-baked cultivator, she was extremely intelligent, and her intelligence was no less than that of Zhou Qin. Ding Nan took over as the leader and quickly eradicated the dissidents. After taking control of the sect's power, she immediately abolished the way of Yin-Yang double cultivation, which was criticized by her colleagues in the cultivation world. In fact, the reason why Ding Nan abolished the way of Yin-Yang double cultivation was very simple. Because she was a virgin, she couldn't stand this way of cultivation. Moreover, she was a proud and arrogant woman. Except for Li Yundong, if Li Yundong asked her to have sex with him, she would naturally be willing. But she didn't care about other people at all. How could she be willing to give her virginity to other stinky men? If they couldn't have sex, they naturally couldn't have sex with each other. But if the leader of the Yin-Yang sect didn't practice the way of Yin-Yang double cultivation, what was that? In desperation, Ding Nan had to learn from Ko Qianji's practice in Northern Wei. In front of the disciples of the sect, she pointed out that although the way of Yin-Yang double cultivation could greatly increase a cultivator's shinqi, this kind of power came too fast and too light. Therefore, most of the cultivators of the Yin-Yang sect were frivolous and exaggerated, and the Niden in their bodies was not strong enough. When it encountered the Niden of thunder and fire that had been tempered by Li Yundong, it was really vulnerable. At the same time, Ding Nan announced that the way of Yin-Yang double cultivation was abolished and that she would re-establish the cultivation method of the Yin-Yang sect. As soon as this matter was announced, the Yin-Yang sect was in an uproar. Ding Nan had just taken office not long ago, but she was actually going to abolish the dogma left by the ancestors for 2,000 years? For a moment, there was a lot of discussion in the sect, and people's hearts were wavering. Although Ding Nan was skilled and had made them all obedient, many people still wanted to watch coldly from the sidelines, wanting to see what Ding Nan would do. At this time, Ding Nan was sitting cross-legged on a futon. Her eyes were closed, and her red lips were slightly parted. She slowly inhaled and exhaled. Every time she exhaled, a stream of white qi shot out like a sharp arrow. On the top of her head, the Baihui acupoint was opened, and a stream of white qi visible to the naked eye rose. This white qi went straight into the sky through the stone cave above her head. At the same time, a lighter white qi slowly descended from the stone cave, as if it was the qi of the 9 heavens that Ding Nan had drawn down herself. In the deep pit in front of her, there was a constant stream of dark qi coming out of the ground, as if she had drawn the yin qi of the 9 heavens from the 9 heavens. These 2 auras continuously drilled into Ding Nan's body and soon gathered together. The crowd saw that Ding Nan's body was shrouded by a mass of white qi and a mass of black qi. These 2 masses of qi were entangled and tumbling as if they were fighting. But not long after, these 2 kinds of qi slowly condensed into one and turned into a huge yin and yang pattern, slowly flowing behind Ding Nan. Many cultivators of the yin-yang sect were sitting cross-legged beside Ding Nan, including Alba and Song Guohua, who was most trusted by Ding Nan. The 2 of them stared at Ding Nan with their eyes wide open, not daring to breathe too loudly. They all knew that they were Ding Nan's trusted subordinates. If Ding Nan broke her promise and her disciples rebelled, they would also be in trouble. Therefore, whether Ding Nan could create a brand new method of yin-yang double cultivation in public was a matter of great importance to their safety. Alba had only cultivated for a short time, so she could not see the clues of the qi on Ding Nan's body. She could be regarded as a layman watching the fun. However, Song Guohua had been with Zheng Yuan for a long time. He was a dabbler cultivator who could recite even if he could not compose poems, so he more or less knew something. At a glance, he could see that Ding Nan had integrated the yin and yang qi of the heaven and earth into one and could control it freely. In particular, her body was emitting a faint golden light, as if a golden body had appeared. This really made him so excited that he almost burst into tears. Although he was a bootlicker, who didn't want to have an awesome boss? Who didn't want their sect to be awesome one day? But now, Ding Nan let him see hope. It was the time when the spirit qi of heaven and earth was overflowing, and it was the best golden time for cultivation. The Mount Wuhua was clear and beautiful, and the mountains were like 5 dragons playing with pearls. It could be called a blessed land for dragons and tigers to achieve the Tao. Moreover, this grotto was a cultivation residence that Zheng Yuan had spent decades building. Ordinary people could not ask for it at all, so it could be said to be a favorable location. Ding Nan had absorbed the immortal qi of the Diyu and Jindan by chance when she was on the Tiandu peak of Mount Huangshan. Although she had cultivated for a short time, her body had already been recreated by the elixir. She was also intelligent and had a strong comprehension. She had long had the foundation and qualifications to soar into the sky. The combination of the right time, the right place, and the right people immediately created Ding Nan's amazing cultivation in the future. Although Ding Nan strictly prohibited and abolished the way of yin-yang dual cultivation between men and women, she carried forward the way of yin-yang dual cultivation between heaven and earth. She advocated collecting the yang qi of heaven and gathering the yin qi of earth, and placing the 2 qis in her own furnace to attack each other. She would then collect the yin to supplement the yang and strengthen herself. Although this cultivation method was not original, it was indeed the highest realm of yin-yang dual cultivation in the yin-yang sect. Although others understood the principle, they did not have the ability to cultivate it. Even Zheng Yuan could not do it, because he was not a body recreated by the elixir and could not stand the cultivation method of yin-yang dual cultivation between heaven and earth. But Ding Nan endured it and successfully broke through to the Jinshan phase. Although she could not directly place the yang spirit in the heavenly thunder to temper and absorb the spiritual qi of heaven and earth during the thunder retribution period, it was still possible to wet a small bath at the edge of the thunderclouds and take a small advantage. Ding Nan had successfully caught the last train of the thunder retribution, and also successfully shocked her subordinates. When she finished her cultivation, stood up, and opened her bright eyes, everyone in the stone room had already prostrated themselves on the ground. In the past, they had shamelessly complimented Ding Nan and said, "Sect leader Wu Hua, your spiritual power is divine. You are the only one in the world." It was not that they did not feel disgusted, but in order to survive, they had to be thick-skinned and shout like this. But now, Ding Nan had convinced them all. At such a young age, she could easily reach the Jinshan phase with the highest cultivation method of the Yin-Yang sect. This was really shocking. Jinshan was a realm that every cultivator dreamed of. Cultivating to this realm meant that a cultivator had the admission ticket to the Thunder Retribution. Although the position after entering the realm might be different because of their different cultivation, they were still qualified to face the heavenly thunder. Being able to survive the Thunder Retribution meant that this cultivator had the hope of becoming an immortal or a sage. It meant that a sect could rely on this person's own strength to revitalize it and carry it forward. In the future, they would no longer have to look at the cultivators of the big sects such as the Zhengyi school and the Quanzhen school. Therefore, this time, they were all sincerely convinced and shouted, "Sect leader Wu Hua, your spiritual power is divine. You are the only one in the world." At this moment, they all firmly believed that the cultivation world would undergo great changes because of their sect leader. Ding Nan was also looking at her hands at this time. She felt an unprecedented powerful force filling her body. This kind of power made her want to look up at the sky and laugh wildly. She knew that her cultivation had finally caught up. She finally had the qualifications to stand in front of Li Yundong and compete with him. She also finally had the strength to defeat Zhou Qin. "Li Yundong, I won't let you look down on me. You can hate me, curse me, or hate me, but I won't let you look down on me and ignore me." Ding Nan suddenly clenched her fists, her eyes shining with ambition and excitement. "Li Yundong, I won't let you look down on me. I'm going to give you a big surprise. And Zhou Qin, just you wait. I, Ding Nan, am coming. The Great Flood is coming. When I write the Great Flood, I will make up for the previous chapter." Chapter 8:26. Time passed by quickly. After the Spring Festival, the land of China quickly welcomed the 2 solar terms of spring and rain. After the Spring Festival, it meant that the lifeless winter had passed and the spring season, which was full of vitality, had arrived. There was an agricultural proverb in the central part of China. It said, "A moment of spring is worth 1,000 pieces of gold." This saying was also common to cultivators. Although the spring thunder had not yet begun, many cultivators were already looking forward to it and began to prepare for the lightning tribulation. Cultivators believed that the spring festival was divided into 3 phases. The first phase was the arrival of the primordial bird, the second phase was the start of the thunder, and the third phase was the start of the lightning. Thunder was the power of heaven, and lightning was the power of the earth. Thunder without lightning was not suitable for the lightning tribulation, because there was only the power of heaven and not the power of the earth. It was impossible to combine yin and yang, and it was easy to be struck to death by the thunder. Therefore, only after the 3 phases were over would the thunder and lightning strike from the sky, which would make it much safer. After the Spring Festival, it was the start of the rain. In the guide to the 72 phases of the lunar order, it was said that in the middle of the first month, the element of wood began, but the one that gave birth to wood must be water. Therefore, after the Spring Festival came the rain. Cultivators also divided the rain into 3 phases. The first phase was when the otter sacrificed the fish, the second phase was when the swan goose came, and the third phase was when the vegetation grew. In the third phase, the spring wind sneaked into the night and quietly moistened everything. Everything had begun to grow, and the vigorous rain from the sky moistened the earth. Therefore, the chi of heaven and earth merged and overflowed with spiritual energy. At this time, the thunder was ready to strike, and the awakening of insects came unexpectedly. In the guide to the 72 phases of the lunar order, it was said that in the second month, all things came out of the earthquake, and the earthquake became thunder, so it was called the awakening of insects. At this time, the thunder was not as weak as the thunder during the Spring Festival, and its vitality was weak. The thunder at this time was astonishing, and each thunder was full of the power of heaven. Therefore, it could awaken the insects and beasts buried deep in the earth. At this time, on Mount Longhu, rumble. A bolt of lightning streaked across the sky. The sound of thunder rolled like a torrent, coming from the distant horizon and quickly moving to the far end of the horizon. In a small Taoist temple on a side peak of Mount Longhu, Zhang Lufang was squatting in front of a low and shabby stone step in front of the Taoist temple. She was supporting her head with both hands and looking up at the dense dark clouds in the sky. Lightning was constantly flashing and rolling in the clouds, and the edges of the clouds were illuminated by the white light from time to time. In the black roof in front of her, the rain was like a broken string of pearls, dripping down in a string, splashing in front of the stone steps, drenching her tube, but she herself did not notice it. Senior sister, senior sister. Suddenly, a male voice with a strange accent came out from the thunder. It was Hardadef, who was cultivating in Mount Longhu. Since Hardadef had already become a disciple of Zhang Kongyun, according to the management of the cultivation world, foreigners who entered the cultivation world to cultivate must take a Chinese name. Therefore, Hardadef took the name he got from Li Yundong, Li's senator. When Hardadef said the name himself, Zhang Kongyun and Zhang Lufang were surprised for a while, but after hearing that it was Li Yundong who gave the name, they did not say anything. He had chosen the right name. Hardadef was a person who lacked wood in the 5 elements. The name Li Sun only had 2 characters, but there were 4 wood in it, so it must be suitable for the occasion. When Zhang Lufang heard Hardadef calling her, she turned her head and saw that Hardadef, no, Li Sun was wearing a short, tight Taoist robe and a low Taoist crown on his head. When he walked, he was in a hurry. From time to time, his feet were caught by the Taoist robe, and he could not move his feet. He was like a woman who was wearing a miniskirt and did not like it. He walked crookedly, which was very awkward and funny. Li Sun was a burly man, a typical Western burly man. Most of the cultivators on Mount Longhu were of medium build and were short. Especially Zhang Kongyun himself, who was a thin and shriveled old man. How could he have a loose and fitting Taoist robe? Zhang Kongyun had to find a Taoist robe given to him by the sect and give it to Li's senator. He asked him to make do with it first, and then he would make a new one for Li's senator. However, at this time, the Jingyi school was busy both inside and outside. They had to prevent the Xiantian sect from seizing power, prepare for the Thunder Tribulation, and prepare to deal with the mystical silver fox. Any one of these 3 things was a big deal. Only a big sect like the Jingyi school could carry out these 3 things at the same time. If other sects wanted to do these 3 things at the same time, they would have to do it in a complicated way. At this time, everyone in the Jingyi school was so busy that they were kicking the back of their heads with their heels. Each of these 3 things was related to the survival of the sect. Who had time to pay attention to Li Sun, a blonde and blue-eyed foreigner? What's more, it was just a small matter of changing a Taoist robe. Therefore, Li Sun's matter had been delayed. He walked like a palace girl in a cheongsam and wooden clogs who had just entered the palace in the Qing dynasty. When Zhang Lufang saw Li Sun's appearance, she couldn't help but burst out laughing. She said with a smile, "Blockhead, why are you in such a hurry?" Before she could finish her sentence, she saw Li Sun suddenly stumble. His body slanted and he fell face first onto the ground. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and supported himself with both hands. He didn't suffer any injuries, but his expression and posture were very funny. Zhang Lufang laughed, raised her hands slightly, and said with a smile, "Sure Di, you don't have to be so polite. Haven't I already given you a red packet? Why are you still kowtowing? Do you want more red packets? Hee, let me tell you, there's no way to do that. The landlord doesn't have any extra money." Li Sun got up awkwardly and patted the dirt on his body with both hands. As he pulled at his tight Taoist robe, he muttered in annoyance, "Damn it, why is this robe so strong? It won't break even if I fall." He originally wanted to tear the bottom of the Taoist robe to make it easier for him to walk, but no matter how strong he was, the Taoist robe did not move at all. Zhang Lufang smiled and told him that this was a Taoist robe specially designed for newcomers to practice. It was extremely strong and even had a certain degree of resistance to blows and swords. Other sects would not have such benefits, so he didn't have to be picky. Li Sen gave up the idea of transforming the Taoist robe and began the painful process of falling every day. He soon became the object of Zhang Liufang's daily teasing. Because his name had a lot of mu in it, and sometimes he looked a little dull, Zhang Liufang called him Blockhead and Blockhead. Blockhead Li said awkwardly, Shiji, I don't want a red packet. I just want to ask you, what is the gathering of 3 flowers at one's prominence? Were they wearing 3 flowers on his head? Master is not here, so I don't understand a lot of things. As he said that, he took out a thread-bound book from behind him and looked at Zhang Liufang like a curious baby. Zhang Liufang patted her forehead and painfully said, 3 flowers on the head? Oh my God, you can really think. What is the 5 cheese collecting in mind? The 5 cheese collecting in renminbi? Dollars? You don't even know this. You are really a blank piece of paper. Although Zhang Liufang made fun of Blockhead Li every day, Blockhead Li pestered Zhang Liufang every day and asked her some very basic questions. Although these questions were no less than doctoral level questions for a foreigner like him, for a cultivator like Zhang Liufang, they were simply addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division for a junior student. She actually had to answer him every day. At first, she could teach him with great interest, but Blockhead Li's foundation was too poor. She had to explain a very simple thing to him for a long time, and sometimes even when she was sweating profusely, he was still at a loss, which made Zhang Liufang so angry that she wanted to strangle this stupid blockhead to death. After a long time, Zhang Liufang felt pain when she saw Blockhead Li ask such questions. Blockhead Li looked at Zhang Liufang with a silly smile. He didn't know that his Shiji was annoyed by him asking such questions. He was like a child looking at a famous teacher, full of expectation. Zhang Kongyun was now in seclusion, preparing for the thunder retribution. It would be difficult for Zhang Liufang to refuse even if she wanted to, but she didn't want to talk to this blockhead for a long time. Just as she was having a headache, she suddenly thought of something and said with a smile, Do you want to know what it means to gather 3 flowers in acupoint? Come on, I'll take you to see my eldest Shiji. She will tell you. Zhang Liufang, on the other hand, was thinking of a plan to divert the trouble and throw this guy to someone else to bother. Li Sen didn't know that Zhang Liufang disliked him and wanted to dump him. He nodded with a smile on his face and said, Okay, eldest Shiji is very powerful. She must know. Li Sen had also seen Zhou Ping from a distance. He only felt that this eldest Shiji was not only beautiful, but also strict. She must be a very powerful person. Zhang Liufang muttered in her heart, She is not as powerful as me, but, humph, if you annoy her later, she will teach you a lesson for me. No matter what, I am your Shiji. It's not easy to deal with her. Later, eldest Shiji will do it for me, he. She made up her mind, got up, found a bamboo umbrella, and said, Let's go, blockhead. After saying that, she walked towards the rain gracefully. Li Sen hurriedly put away the book, found a bamboo umbrella, and chased after her, shouting, Shiji, wait for me. The two of them walked slowly along the mountain path of Mount Longhu in the early spring rain. After about half an hour, Zhang Liufang arrived at the Taoist master's mansion on the main peak. Although the weather was not good, the Taoist master's mansion was still full of incense and pilgrims. Zhang Liufang found a young Taoist priest and shouted in a crisp voice, Hey, Shixiang, where is eldest Shiji? Isn't she on duty today? Although there were many female Taoist priests in the Zhengyi school, Zhang Liufang was one of the most outstanding ones. Many of the male cultivators of the younger generation were in love with her. When the young Taoist priest saw Zhang Liufang, he immediately smiled eagerly and said, It's you, Shimi. Eldest Shiji is not on duty today. It seems that she has gone to cultivate in seclusion with eldest uncle. In the Zhengyi school, Zhang Ling's seniority was the highest, and Zhou Ping was her eldest disciple. Therefore, everyone knew that she was referring to Zhou Ping. Among the older generation, Zhang Kongyan's seniority was only higher than Wang Yuanshan's. The rest of them had to call everyone Shiji or Shixiang. Zhang Lufang was his disciple, so her seniority was also very low. As soon as Zhang Lufang was mentioned, everyone knew that she was referring to Zhang Lufang. When Zhang Lufang heard that Zhou Ping had gone into seclusion, she suddenly looked resentful and disappointed. When will she come out of seclusion? When she asked this question, she felt a little silly. She must have come out after the Thunder Retribution period. The young Taoist priest laughed and said, I don't know. Why are you looking for eldest Shiji? Zhang Lufang quickly waved her hand and said, Nothing, nothing. As she said this, she turned around and whispered with a sad face, What should we do? Who can we find to lead this trouble to her? Mutali, who was standing to one side, heard her muttering and hurriedly came over. Shiji, what did you say? Zhang Lufang was shocked, but soon she thought of something. She clapped her hands and asked, By the way, where is Shixiang Tianhe? Zhang Lufang was talking about Zhang Tianhe, who had once been the pride of the Zhenyi school. After being beaten down by Li Yunyang and Shinxiu, he had finally lost all his arrogance and started to cultivate honestly. Not only did Zhang Tianhe have a high seniority, but he was also the direct descendant of Master Zhang. Wherever he went, people looked up to him, so he developed a bad habit of looking down on the top of his head. He was originally talented, and his understanding of cultivation was quite good. Therefore, when he focused on cultivation, he really made tremendous progress. He could still be called the leader of the younger generation of the Zhenyi school. When the young Taoist priest heard her ask about Zhang Tianhe, he felt a little embarrassed and hesitated. Zhang Lufang asked curiously, What's wrong? Is it inconvenient for you to say it? Forget it. After that, she waved her hand and said, Then I'll go first. It was rare for the young Taoist priest to say a few words to this beautiful and playful junior sister. Seeing that she was about to leave, he quickly said, Hey, junior sister, don't be in such a hurry. I didn't say it was inconvenient. After that, he moved closer to Zhang Lufang, lowered his voice, and said, Shixiang Tianhe is now at the side peak. You can find him there, but don't tell him that I said it. As he spoke, the young Taoist pointed to a mountain in the distance. Zhang Lufang looked over and was stunned. Strange, isn't this the peak of Shishu Wang Yuanshan? Why is Shixiang Tianhe here? But she didn't think too much about it. She quickly walked toward the side peak. As she walked, she turned around and waved. Thank you. Li Sen also quickly followed behind and shouted, Senior sister, wait for me. His voice was so loud that the pilgrims next to him looked at him in surprise. Especially when they saw that he was a foreigner with blonde hair and blue eyes, their eyes widened even more. The young Taoist priest raised his head and watched Zhang Liufang's pretty figure disappear from his sight. After a moment of loss, he obediently returned to his position. Zhang Lufang quickly took Li Sen to the side peak where the Linggong sect was located. As soon as they reached the foot of the mountain, Zhang Lufang suddenly felt a sharp sword qi piercing through the air and fiercely stabbing toward her. Chapter 827. The sword qi was so fierce that Zhang Lufang didn't expect that she would be attacked in the territory of Mount Longhu. She was so scared that she almost couldn't react. But very quickly, this sword qi swiftly flashed past Zhang Liufang's side, chopping down on the hard stone steps of the mountain path, cleaving open a crack on the bluestone pavement. Mutali stared blankly, his mouth unable to close for a long time. How dare you trespass the forbidden area of Mount Longhu? A rough voice rang out like thunder, and soon a fierce-looking Taoist priest appeared in front of them like a ghost. Zhang Lufang took a closer look and found that she didn't know the Taoist priest. She stammered, Who are you? I'm not an outsider, I'm. Before she could finish speaking, the Taoist priest suddenly laughed and said, Oh, it's you, Shernice. How is your master? He's about to undergo the lightning tribulation, isn't he? Zhang Lufang asked curiously, You know my master? The Taoist priest laughed and said, when I met your master, you weren't even born. Zhang Lufang blinked her eyes and giggled. So you're my Shibua? How should I address you, Shibua? The Taoist priest smiled and said, you can call me Immortal Linghua. Sure niece, what are you doing here? Didn't your master tell you that this place has been sealed? Zhang Lufang shook her head blankly. I don't know. Why is it sealed? Immortal Linghua smiled and said, it's none of your business. Tell me, what are you doing here? If there's nothing else, leave quickly. Zhang Lufang said, is Xixiang Tianhe here? I have something to talk to him about. Immortal Linghua thought for a moment and said, Zhang Tianhe? Huh? How do you know he's here? Zhang Lufang giggled and said, I can calculate with my fingers 500 years in the future and 5,000 years in the past. Seeing her naughty look, Immortal Linghua couldn't help laughing. You little girl, you were naughty when you were young, and you're still like that when you grow up. Well, I won't ask. He's in the cave halfway up the mountain. You can go in and find him yourself. Zhang Lufang was overjoyed. Thank you, Shibua. Then she waved her hand and said to Li Sun, who was a little nervous, let's go, blockhead. Immortal Linghua's face suddenly darkened. Wait, he can't go in. Zhang Lufang immediately said anxiously, Uncle Linghua, he's also a disciple of our Jingyi school. Why can't he enter? Reverend Spirit Flame's face was ashen as he said, those who are not of our race must have a different heart. Immortal Linghua's face was livid. Zhang Lufang was a little angry, but her face was full of pleading. She said pitifully, Uncle Linghua, he is my master's disciple and also my junior brother. You won't disrespect my master and your poor martial nephew, right? I Xixiang Tianhe QT go in. Tiant, he, Li Sei, Shan, I said, Zhang Lufang was beautiful and very popular, so Reverend Spirit Flame hesitated for a moment before sinking into contemplation. Seeing this, Zhang Lufang suddenly pulled Li Sen and said, Blockhead, run. Then she pulled Li Sen and ran inside. Immortal Linghua was so angry that he couldn't help shouting, Stop. Zhang Lufang turned back and made a face at him. She said with a smile, Thank you, Immortal Linghua. I'll treat you to dinner later. Immortal Linghua couldn't help but laugh and shake his head. This little girl. The corners of his eyes were full of love for the younger generation. Zhang Lufang barged in with Li Senator. She laughed all the way until she was out of breath. Her heart was filled with the pride of having done something bad. After a while, she arrived at the mountainside. She looked around and suddenly found a place overflowing with spiritual qi and sword qi soaring into the sky. Her heart moved and she walked towards that place. The side peak where the Linggong sect was located was extremely large. It could be said that two peaks were connected. One was the peak where the Taoist temple of the Linggong sect was located. The fierce battle between the Chinese cultivation world and the Japanese cultivation world took place on this peak. The other peak next to it was the peak where the Fengchen stone imprisoned Wang Yuanshan. Right now, Zhang Lufang was heading towards the mountain peak where Wang Yuanshan was imprisoned. She led Li Sen for a while, and sure enough, halfway up the mountain, they walked along the mountain path for a while. Suddenly, the willows darkened and the flowers brightened. In front of them was a huge stone cave. At the entrance of the cave stood two Taoists in their 30s. When they saw Zhang Lufang and Li Sen, they sternly shouted, Who is it? Zhang Lufang quickly said, It's me, Zhang Lufang. The two Taoist priests immediately relaxed their vigilance and laughed, It's junior martial sister. As they spoke, they looked at Li Sen in surprise, as if they did not understand why he was here. Zhang Lufang smiled and said, I'm looking for Tianhe Xixiang. Is he here? The two Taoist priests asked curiously, How do you know Zhang Tianhe is here? Zhang Lufang rolled her eyes and said, Uncle Linghua told me. The two Taoist priests suddenly understood. One of them smiled and said, So that's how it is. He is indeed here. Do you want me to call him? As soon as the man finished speaking, Zhang Tianhe's voice was heard softly. No, I'm here. As he spoke, a man of medium height walked out of the stone cave. He was handsome and had a smile on his face. The arrogance between his eyebrows had completely disappeared, replaced by humility and peace. Zhang Tianhe carried a 3-foot-long sword on his back. It was the 7-star sword, one of the 5 famous swords of Taoism. When Zhang Tianhe saw Zhang Lufang, he smiled slightly and said very politely, "Little sister, what can I do for you?" As he spoke, he saw Li Sen beside him, but he did not have the strong hostility of the others. He smiled slightly and saluted. "Jinren Li Sen, you have time to come today." What a rare guest. After Zhang Tianhe came back from the Taoist assembly, he had witnessed Li Yunyang defeat several masters of the Japanese cultivation world on his own at Mount Longhu. He was extremely shocked and seemed to have changed into a different person. Although he used to treat people kindly, he always exuded a condescending arrogance. But at this time, Zhang Tianhe's politeness and easygoing attitude came from the bottom of his heart, making people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. Zhang Lufang saw this and thought to herself, Shixiang Tianhe suffered a series of defeats before, and I was worried that he would not be able to recover, but I didn't expect him to be a direct descendant of the celestial master. He was able to rise from the ashes and pull himself together. His cultivation is far better than before. Zhang Lufang saw that Zhang Tianhe was extremely amiable at this moment, as if he was not angry at all. She quickly realized something. That's not right. If senior brother Tianhe was so amiable and polite, then he wouldn't have taught this blockhead a lesson. Doesn't that mean my plan has failed? Zhang Lufang rolled her eyes and said with a smile, "Actually, it's nothing. I just miss Shixiang Tianhe, so I came to play with him. Can't I?" As she said this, she took Zhang Tianhe's arm very affectionately and shook it gently. Zhang Tianhe laughed and said, "Yes, of course, but it's a little inconvenient now." Zhang Lufang asked curiously, "What's inconvenient about it? By the way, what are you guys doing here so mysteriously?" Zhang Tianhe hesitated for a moment, and Zhang Lufang said with a smile, "Oh, I'm hiding it from you." "No way. I'm not an outsider. What treasures are hidden in this stone cave? Take me in to have a look." Zhang Tianhe thought for a moment and said with a smile, "Well, Shixiang, you're a guest from afar. Come in and have a seat." At this time, the 2 Taoist priests who were guarding the cave immediately blurted out, "Isn't that a little inappropriate?" Zhang Tianhe smiled and said, "Shixiang Lufang is a direct descendant of our Zhuni school, and Li Sen is also a person who admires the teachings of our sect. What's wrong with that? I'm just taking them in to have a look." Zhang Tianhe was recognized as the next successor of Celestial Master Zhang in the Zhuni school. As soon as he said this, the 2 Taoist priests kept silent. Zhang Lufang was overjoyed. She turned her head and said to Li Sen with a smile, "Let's go, blockhead. Let's go in and see what these guys are up to." The 2 of them followed Zhang Tianhe into the stone cave. At first, the entrance to the stone cave was quite large, but the further they went, the narrower it became. Gradually, both sides could only accommodate 1 person. There was no light in the depths of the stone cave. It was almost impossible to see one's fingers in front of them. Zhang Tianhe walked in front of them. No one saw him move, but the sword on his back automatically flew out, buzzing and emitting a white light, illuminating the path under their feet. Zhang Lufang had seen the 7 stars sword before, so she didn't think it was strange. However, Li Sen's eyes were fixed on it, and his eyes were filled with envy. Zhang Lufang saw his expression and was secretly moved. She was about to speak when she suddenly heard Zhang Tianhe say, "Be careful." As he spoke, he suddenly stopped in his tracks and turned around to greet the 2 of them. Then, he leaped and disappeared from where he stood. Only the 7 stars sword was still floating in the air, illuminating the way for them like a searchlight. Zhang Lufang took a closer look and saw that there was a huge grotto in front of her. It was the size of 3 football fields, and the road under her feet had been cut off. There was a high platform more than 3 meters high, and there were all kinds of talismans drawn under the platform. It must be a huge formation. Zhang Lufang was shocked. She looked up and saw that not only were the ground full of talismans, but the stone walls around the grotto were also covered with dense talisman marks. At the top of the grotto, she could faintly see a small hole, through which a faint light was shining. Like Zi Yuan, Zhang Lufang was an inner disciple who had been cultivating since childhood. She knew a lot of cultivation knowledge, but she had never seen such a large formation. What is this? Zhang Lufang was stunned and stammered. Zhang Tianhe smiled slightly and said, "Sister Shimmy, just take a look. There's no need to talk about it, or there will be trouble." Zhang Liufang's heart trembled. She jumped down from the high platform, stepped on the formation, and looked at each of the talisman marks in awe. Zhang Tianhe looked up at Li Sen, only to find that he didn't look at the formation at all. His eyes were fixed on his 7 stars sword, and his eyes were full of curiosity and love. He couldn't help but look at Zhang Lufang, then said with a smile, "Do you want to give it a try?" At first, Li Sen didn't realize that Zhang Tianhe was talking to him, so he was at a loss. When Zhang Tianhe said it again, Zhang Lufang shouted, "Hey, blockhead, I'm talking to you." Li Sen seemed to wake up from a dream and said blankly, "Ah? What?" Although Zhang Tianhe was also a cultivator, he was young and didn't have the deep xenophobia of older cultivators. He smiled at Li Sen and said, "Do you want to give it a try?" As he said this, he controlled the 7 stars sword to float in front of Li Senator. Li Sen couldn't believe his ears. He stared at the glowing 7 stars sword in front of him in surprise and said, Can I try?" Zhang Lufang pursed her lips and said with a smile, "Blockhead, I asked you to try. Just do it." Li Sen gathered his courage and stretched out his hand to grab the 7-star treasured sword. However, he suddenly felt a huge force coming towards him. It was as if he was riding on a wild horse that was carrying him and leaping out. When the 7-star treasured sword felt that someone else was holding onto it, it immediately began to struggle frantically. In an instant, it brought Li Sen into midair and jolted him like a wild horse. In the blink of an eye, Li Sen was shaken down from midair. Li Sen let out a blood-curdling scream. Just as he was about to break his tendons and break his bones, Zhang Tianhe reacted quickly and pulled him back, allowing him to regain his balance and land on his feet. Zhang Tianhe smiled apologetically and said, "Sorry, I was careless." As he said this, he waved the 7-star sword with one hand, then pointed his finger and said, "Tut." The 7-star sword suddenly froze in the air. It no longer made a buzzing sound or trembled. Zhang Tianhe smiled and said, "Zhenren Li Sen, why don't you try again?" Li Mudu was so scared just now that he didn't dare to try again. He looked timid. Zhang Lufang, who was next to him, saw his timid look and was so angry that she kicked his leg. "I asked you to try, so just try. What are you afraid of?" Only then did Li Sen dare to reach out and gently hold the hilt of the sword. This time, the 7-star treasured sword did not struggle anymore. It was like an ordinary treasured sword. Li Sen tried waving it a few times, as if he was a child who had obtained a treasure. He waved his hands and feet, gesticulating. Zhang Lufang giggled, while Zhang Tianhe looked at him with a smile. Just as he was about to speak, they suddenly heard a loud rumble coming from outside. The sound was so loud that it shook the 2 people in the stone cave. Zhang Lufang exclaimed, "What a frightening heavenly thunder! Is someone going through a lightning tribulation?" The power of heavenly thunder would only be fully displayed when someone was going through a lightning tribulation. Zhang Lufang and Zhang Tianhe looked at each other and said in unison, "Let's go and take a look." The 2 of them leaped and ran outside. Zhang Tianhe was the fastest, and he disappeared in an instant. Li Sen, on the other hand, didn't seem to notice as he continued to swing his 7-star treasure sword. Zhang Lufang jumped onto the high platform and found that Li Sen was still waving the sword. She couldn't help but laugh and say, "Hey, Mutu, let's go. Stop playing. Li Sen reluctantly stroked the 7-star treasured sword with his finger. He responded and quickly ran toward Zhang Lufang. But at this time, he was a little anxious and unconsciously took a big step forward. Immediately, the Taoist robe under his feet pulled at his feet, causing him to stumble and fall forward. Li Sen's eyes and hands were quick. He stabbed the 7-star sword into the ground, and with a clanging sound, he used the sword as a support to stabilize himself. Zhang Lufang was scared and shouted, "Hey, are you okay?" Li Sen was also scared and turned pale. He stammered, I'm fine. He pulled the 7-star sword out of the ground. After he climbed up the high platform, he smiled at Zhang Lufang embarrassedly and handed the sword to her. Zhang Lufang didn't take it. She just rolled her eyes and said, "You can even fall like this? I really admire you. Let's go, we shouldn't stay here any longer." As she spoke, she muttered to herself along the way and quickly left with Li Senator. However, none of them knew that when Li Sen used the 7-star sword to support his body, the extremely sharp blade of the 7-star sword had broken a rune on the giant magic array. It was this crack that was less than an inch long that had caused a great disaster. Chapter 828. The mystery of fate lay in the fact that no one could predict what would happen in the future. Even Lu Guandao's stargazing and the Buddhist sect's destiny could not see through the mysteries of the heavens. Just like Wang Chongyang, the founder of the Chuanjin sect in the northern Song dynasty, who had passed the Jinshi examination and then the Jinshi examination. He could be said to be a great talent who excelled in both the pen and the sword. He thought that he was going to show off his skills, but the corrupt officialdom at that time made him powerless. He could only angrily hang up his crown and become a chivalrous hero, looking for people to fight and PK. He was hated by the locals as Wang Baofeng. But who would know that it was this Wang Baofeng who met an immortal at the age of 48 and began to cultivate. 2 years later, he built the tomb of the living dead and concentrated on his cultivation. 3 years later, he reached the pinnacle of cultivation. 7 years later, he went to Shandong to preach and founded the world-famous Chuanjin sect. He then became a famous figure in the Chinese cultivation world and even in Chinese history. Coincidentally, when Li Yundong was also given the good guy card by one girl after another on campus, who would have known that this crazy loser would one day become a top master who would shock China and Japan? Who would have guessed what kind of realm he would reach in the future and what kind of career he would achieve? No one knew. The mysteries of heaven were mysterious and unfathomable by mortals. It was also because of this that John, an American man who had changed his name to Li Sen and was extremely devout in the art of Chinese cultivation, did not know that he had accidentally tripped and actually caused a fatal disaster. Zhang Lufang also didn't know that on a whim, she had brought her big-nosed junior brother here for a curious trip. The result was that she had stirred up a monstrous disaster for herself, and was almost expelled from the sect. Similarly, Zhang Tianhe, whose emotions had changed drastically, did not know that he had lent Li Sen the 7-star sword to play with for a while. Especially when he saw Li Sen playing with it when he came out of the stone, he hesitated a little and did not take the sword with him. In the future, he had provoked the Zhengyi sect and almost destroyed it. When Zhang Lufang ran out of the stone with her big-nosed junior brother, Zhang Tianhe and the others had no idea that there was a flaw in the formation in the stone. They raised their heads and looked at the thick dark clouds in the sky. Each of them had different expressions. Some looked excited, some were full of curiosity, and some had solemn eyes. Li Sen didn't know why they were like this, so he also looked up at the sky curiously. Zhang Lufang couldn't help but ask, "Senior brothers, is someone crossing the lightning tribulation? Which perfected master is going through the thunder tribulation? Is he from our Zhengyi school?" Zhang Lufang kept asking, but the 2 young Taoist priests didn't have time to answer her. They were focused on looking at the clouds. Only Zhang Tianhe lowered his head and smiled patiently. "Junior apprentice sister, your master is undergoing his thunder tribulation." Zhang Liufang's eyes widened in surprise. Ah. Has he started his lightning tribulation? Zhang Tianhe smiled slightly and said, yes, it's time for the awakening sting. Every minute and second is worth 1,000 gold. Your master has already cultivated to the golden body realm. I hope he can successfully pass the thunder tribulation this time. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone suddenly saw a golden light rushing up from the main peak of the Zhini sect. This golden light went straight to the sky and instantly disappeared into the thunderclouds. After a while, the thunderclouds were filled with lightning and thunder, shaking heaven and earth. Zhang Lufang couldn't help exclaiming, "Oh, is that the sect master?" Zhang Tianhe couldn't help but look a little nervous. Yes, it's the Taoist master. Zhang Lufang clenched her fists and looked nervously at the thick dark clouds rolling in the sky. She couldn't wait to rush into the clouds and see how this top master was going through the thunder tribulation. While she was nervous, Zhang Tianhe said to her, "Junior apprentice sister, I want to meditate for a while. If you don't have anything else to do, can you protect me?" Zhang Lufang rolled her eyes. She knew that Zhang Tianhe was being polite and didn't want to drive her away, so he took a roundabout way. She smiled and said, "Okay, when you're done with the thunder tribulation, can you help protect me?" Zhang Tianhe smiled and said, "Okay." After that, he turned his head and reached out to Li Sun, saying with a smile, "Jinren Li Sun, can you return my 7-star sword?" Li Sun seemed to have woken up from a dream and reluctantly returned the 7-star sword. Zhang Tianhe didn't move much, but he pointed his finger at the 7-star sword. The sword immediately seemed to come to life and drilled into his back. Zhang Lufang watched Zhang Tianhe turn around and enter the stone room. She couldn't help but sigh to herself, "Alas, when can I also go through the thunder tribulation?" As she said this, she looked up at the sky and sighed, "I wonder how many people can successfully reach the thunder tribulation stage this time." As she spoke, she suddenly thought of Li Yundong. She thought to herself, "Invincible Li. He should be going through the thunder tribulation now, right? Can he get through it smoothly?" Boom! Another bolt of lightning flashed across the sky. With a loud crack, it was as if the sky was about to collapse. Everyone in Tiannan City couldn't help but cover their ears, their hearts beating fast. At this time, Li Yundong was sitting cross-legged in the living room. All the electrical appliances and furniture in the room had been moved away, leaving only the cushion under his feet. The surroundings were open, and the windows of the living room and dining room were all open to let air circulate. The strong thunderstorm wind made the curtains rustle. In addition to Li Yundong, the living room was surrounded by people. Su Chan, Ziyuan, Zhou Qin, Lin Miao, and the little foxes of the Fox Zen sect were all looking at Li Yundong nervously. They all knew that this was the most important moment in Li Yundong's life. At this time, Li Yundong's eyes were closed, and he gradually fell into the deepest meditation. After a while, the yin and yang qi in his 2 kidneys flowed, and the yang spirit condensed little by little, forming a jinshin. Everyone saw Li Yundong's figure shake violently, and in an instant, a slightly golden Li Yundong came out of his body. It was his jinshin yang spirit. Li Yundong smiled and nodded at Su Chan and the others, who were worried and nervous around him. After a slight smile, his figure flashed, and in an instant, he split into countless clones, then scattered through the 2 windows of the hall. Then, he rushed straight into the sky and instantly drilled into the thunderclouds. The waking sting in the middle of the sky was not the time when the heavenly thunder was the most powerful, but it was the time when the heavenly thunder was the most alive. It was also the time when God was the most sensitive. At this time, if a cultivator drilled into the sky with the body of the yang spirit, it would be like a thief swaying in front of the police station shouting arrogantly, "Come and catch me." Therefore, as long as a cultivator flew into the thunderclouds with the yang spirit, he would immediately attract countless heavenly thunder. As soon as Li Yundong drilled into the thunderclouds, he suddenly felt a huge force enveloping him. It was so dark that he could hardly see his fingers. Looking up, he saw a huge vortex spinning in the thunderclouds above his head. The lightning in the vortex was increasing, and thunder was bursting. It was as if God was accumulating the power of anger and would instantly blast him into powder. At this time, the pressure brought to him by the heavenly thunder was far greater than when he had faced the heavenly tribulation before. Because the heavenly tribulation at this time was because the strength of a cultivator had reached an amazing level, he began to want to go against the heaven and challenge the power and majesty of God. This was definitely not something that the power of heaven could tolerate, so the power that erupted was far greater than before. Li Yundong only felt that he could hardly move. An extremely strong force in the sky firmly locked him. Even if he escaped from the thunderclouds at this time, he would still be struck by the heavenly thunder. Li Yundong saw that the vortex above his head was spinning faster and faster, and the lightning was getting denser and denser. He knew that this was the most critical moment of life and death. If he didn't go all out, he would definitely be struck into powder and never be reincarnated. There seemed to be a pair of indifferent and contemptuous eyes staring at him in the sky. The earth-shaking thunder seemed to be saying, "Who are you? How dare you challenge the power of heaven?" At this time, Li Yundong only felt that his blood was boiling, and the speed of the Jinqi flowing all over his body suddenly increased. He pinched a Mahamudra with both hands and opened his eyes angrily. With a loud bang, he made a Mahamudra and blasted it toward the vortex in the thunderclouds. He shouted, "All methods return to the origin, man conquers heaven." When ordinary Jinshin masters underwent the heavenly tribulation, they were really trembling, cautious, and extremely nervous. They were in a purely defensive posture, for fear that they would waste a little bit of Jinqi. However, Li Yundong took the initiative to provoke the heavenly tribulation. He regarded it as a battle with God. He thought that such a battle was very important. He had to have a firm and unwavering heart to win, otherwise, the chance of winning was very small. If that was not the case, why were so many Jinshin masters still in the Jinshin realm and not the heavenly tribulation? When Li Yundong's Mahamudra first shot out, it was really shining with golden light, like a missile, looking extremely huge and powerful. But after flying for a while, the Mahamudra became smaller and smaller. Especially when it flew to the center of the vortex, it had become like a small shining golden star in the distant sky, which was almost difficult to see with the naked eye. Then, the Mahamudra was completely swallowed by the vortex of thunderclouds, like a stone ox sinking into the sea. There was no movement at all, only the sound of thunder was still there, as if it was laughing at mortals for overestimating themselves. Li Yundong's heart trembled. The silence and vastness of the sky made him feel an incomparably huge pressure coming from all directions. But he was a person who was stronger than the enemy, the stronger he would be. He quickly pinched a series of Mahamudra and recited the mantra. The Mahamudra, like a machine gun, shot out continuously. At this time, if someone was in this huge thundercloud, they would see a golden giant in the thundercloud blasting Mahamudra into the sky like a storm. These Mahamudra were like a series of missiles, endless, like a golden silk thread, flying straight into the sky. When this series of Mahamudra blasted into the vortex of thunderclouds, they were all swallowed by the rolling dark clouds without exception. At most, there was a burst of lightning, but there was nothing unusual. When Li Yundong's last Mahamudra blasted out, the sky finally moved. There was a terrible light in the vortex, becoming more and more dazzling and scorching. Li Yundong's heart trembled, and he shouted, "Come on." He immediately pinched his fingers and pinched out the mighty Akalanatha Mudra, which could not be moved by the wind. At this time, there was a huge crack in the sky, as if an atomic bomb had exploded. The earth was shaking violently. In an instant, countless thunderbolts in the thundercloud fell in the blink of an eye, densely covering all directions, making it impossible for people to escape. The dazzling thunder and lightning lit up the dark world, making people blind. Li Yundong's Vajra body was instantly swallowed by these countless thunderbolts and smashed into pieces in the blink of an eye. Chapter 829. The power of heavenly thunder was unstoppable. In the past, the mystical silver fox, with her peerless power, was also afraid of the 9-heaven divine night thunder. What's more, Li Yundong was only in the Jinshin phase, and he had provoked the power of heaven before. At this time, the power of heavenly thunder that broke out was really unprecedentedly terrifying. Li Yundong's Vajra body was instantly smashed into countless pieces, and hundreds of millions of clones instantly spread in all directions in the clouds. At this time, if a cultivator who had not comprehended the infinite void realm and had not comprehended the 10,000 methods returning to the origin was like this, it meant that this cultivator's lifetime of cultivation had been in vain. This person's yang spirit had been completely smashed by heavenly thunder and could no longer be restored. His spirit had been destroyed, leaving only his body, and he had become a vegetable. However, Li Yundong had already comprehended the highest realm of cultivation of Buddhism and Taoism. At the moment when he was struck by the heavenly thunder, he cast his mark of the true method on Su Chan, who was watching him nervously. This imprint was like a coordinate. As long as this imprint remained, no matter how much Li Yundong's yang spirit Jinshin was smashed or how far away he was, he could rely on this imprint to gather and reassemble his yang spirit. Li Yundong's yang spirit was split into countless pieces and scattered in the clouds of thunder and lightning, like countless fireflies floating in the air. At first, these fireflies were still floating in the air, but slowly, they began to slowly fly to the ground. If there was a high-power camera to take pictures at this time, it could be clearly seen that when each clone moved, it would attract and pull the dense spiritual chi in the thunderclouds. The reason why cultivators could constantly strengthen themselves during the thunder tribulation was that they relied on the moment they were smashed to crazily absorb the power of heaven left after the heavenly thunder. In other words, the thunder tribulation was a process of destruction and continuous reconstruction. Jinshin being smashed was a serious injury for cultivators. If cultivators did not absorb enough power of heaven in the process of gathering and rebuilding, they would suffer a loss during the thunder tribulation this time. Not only would their cultivation not increase, but it would also decline. This was also why many cultivators who had reached the Jinshin phase would not improve their cultivation when they encountered the thunder tribulation period. Some cultivators had even gone through the thunder tribulation for more than 10 years, but they still could not improve at all. On the contrary, the more they went through, the more courageous they became, for fear that even their current cultivation would be reduced. Li Yundong was like a newborn calf that was not afraid of tigers. He was provoked by the heavenly thunder, which was much more powerful than usual. It struck him into pieces. However, the more powerful the heavenly thunder was, the stronger the spiritual chi it emitted, and the more power Li Yundong could absorb from it. Li Yundong's billions of clones kept flying out of the thunderclouds, and then flew toward his home in Tiannan City. Everyone saw countless visible yellow dots fly into the house, and then quickly gather in front of Su Chan. After a while, Li Yundong's appearance reappeared. Su Chan, Ziyuan, Zhou Qin, and the others all looked at Li Yundong nervously, wanting to see whether he had lost or gained in this heavenly thunder. But when they saw Li Yundong's yang spirit body open his eyes, they were bright and clear, and he did not seem to be injured at all. They immediately felt relieved. At least Li Yundong was not injured, which meant that he had not lost anything just now. The little foxes cheered one by one. If it weren't for the fact that Chao Yi and the others had already been trained, they would have pounced on him long ago. After Li Yundong opened his eyes, he let out a long breath and said with a smile, "What a powerful heavenly thunder. If I hadn't comprehended the true method and true self, I'm afraid this heavenly thunder would have killed me." Su Chan looked at Li Yundong enviously. She waved her fist and cheered him on. "Come on, try to survive the thunder retribution today." Li Yundong reached out with a smile and stroked her head. "Well, don't worry." As he spoke, he nodded to Ziyuan and Zhou Qin, who were looking at him with concern on their faces. Then, his figure flashed and he quickly flew into the thunderclouds. After a while, thunder exploded in the sky again, and a bolt of heavenly thunder almost shattered the glass windows in the living room. Before long, Li Yundong's clone quickly appeared in the living room again. This time, the speed at which it condensed was much faster than the last time. As soon as Li Yundong took shape, he quickly flew into the sky again. Everyone saw him come and go more than 10 times, and each time he did it faster than the last. The Jinshin Yang spirit that he condensed was more dazzling than the last time. Zhou Qin's heart was burning with passion. She wished she could also be in the thunder retribution and have a taste of it. Zi Yuan sighed in her heart. She knew that many Jinshin masters were trembling with fear when facing the thunder retribution. They were so timid that they were struck by the heavenly thunder and could not make ends meet. In the end, their morale was greatly reduced and they became Jinshin masters for the rest of their lives. They saw that Li Yundong was passing through the thunder retribution easily, but in fact, as an inner disciple, she knew very well that the thunder retribution could be said to be a process of suicide and resurrection. This process was extremely painful, and ordinary people could not bear it. Just think about it, if you wanted to be struck into powder by the heavenly thunder, then slowly reassemble, and then be smashed apart again. This was really a painful thing that made people hover between life and death. Just thinking about it was frightening. What if he was split apart by the heavenly thunder and couldn't gather again? What if he failed during the thunder retribution? But Li Yundong didn't have such a thought. First, he never thought about these things. Moving forward bravely was his style. Everyone watched Li Yundong being smashed by the heavenly thunder again and again, and then reassembling again and again. He was like an army that had been defeated repeatedly on the battlefield. He was defeated again and again, but he fought again and again, indomitable and unyielding. Time passed by slowly, and it was already night time. The power of the heavenly thunder also gradually weakened from the earth-shattering power at the beginning. It was as if the heavens, who had been angry for a whole day, was slowly losing its strength. The reason why the heavenly might was terrible was that its power was like the vast sea, unfathomable, and also like the vast sky, continuous and endless. However, Li Yundong had actually held on until even the heavenly might could not withstand it, which was really incredible. When Li Yundong condensed the Jinshin Yang spirit for the last time, everyone also clearly noticed that although the power of Li Yundong's Yang spirit had increased unprecedentedly, after Li Yundong woke up from meditation, he couldn't help but feel tired. His Jinshi and spiritual energy were almost exhausted by the endless heavenly thunder. Li Yundong only felt that he was dying of exhaustion. He could only reluctantly nod to Su Chan, Zi Yuan, and the others to say hello. After struggling back to his room, he tilted his head and fell asleep on the bed. As soon as he fell asleep, the originally dry and exhausted internal organs in his body got a rest and began to slowly become moist again. His body had reached the highest realm of cultivators, and it could be called a perfect body. His internal organs were even more unbelievably strong. Therefore, as soon as he fell asleep, the meridians and organs in his body immediately repaired and recovered at an amazing speed. After only 1 or 2 hours, Li Yundong had recovered. After Li Yundong got up and opened the door, he saw that the house was extremely quiet. The room was also dark and empty, in sharp contrast to the living room that was full of people just now. At this time, everyone thought that Li Yundong would not go through the thunder retribution today, so they all went back to their rooms at this time. At this time, everyone also went into meditation, no longer watching how Li Yundong would go through the thunder retribution. During the period of waking up, every minute and second was valuable. At this time, cultivating in meditation was also twice the result with half the effort. At a glance, Li Yundong saw that no one was around to protect him, so he hesitated. When a cultivator was going through the thunder retribution, his body must be protected by someone. Otherwise, if a powerless person poked him with a knife, even a golden immortal expert would be killed. Cultivators could cultivate the yang spirit to be indestructible, or even invulnerable, but it was impossible to cultivate the body to be invulnerable. Li Yundong hesitated for a while, but then he heard a faint sound of thunder coming from the sky. It seemed that God was provoking him to continue the battle that had not been decided before. Li Yundong raised his eyebrows and immediately took out his personal powerful magical weapon, letting it help protect him around. He sat cross-legged and once again, the Jinshin Yang spirit soared into the sky and went straight into the thunderclouds. After a while, there was a loud rumble of thunder in the sky, as if a giant was roaring angrily. When Li Yundong didn't know how many times he had gathered the Jinshin yang spirit again, he suddenly felt that there was a faint power of thunder in his yang spirit. This suddenly shocked him, and then he was ecstatic. The process of going through the thunder retribution again and again had finally made a qualitative change in him. From the Jinshin to the thunder retribution, there was not such a huge gap as between the yang spirit and the Jinshin. Once a cultivator completed the transformation from the yang spirit to the Jinshin, even a blind man could see the change in the yang spirit. However, after the Jinshin completed the transformation to the thunder retribution, there was not much difference in the appearance. Only he could feel the difference. In terms of power, breaking through from the Jinshin to the thunder retribution meant that the cultivator had successfully absorbed enough power from the power of heaven. Their Jinshi and spiritual energy had the power of heavenly thunder. From then on, they no longer needed to chant incantations to cast any heavenly thunder magic. They could summon it and send it away at will. Moreover, their yang spirit was more powerful, and their spiritual energy was more profound. They were masters who had been tempered by the power of heavenly thunder. Their explosive power and durability would far exceed that of ordinary Jinshin masters. When Li Yundong's yang spirit was once again in the thunderclouds, he looked down at the crisscrossing lightning around him and the vast land under his feet. At this moment, he felt an unprecedentedly powerful force filling his surroundings. He knew that he had successfully broken through to the thunder retribution realm. That night, the thunder resounded through the whole night. Many people in Tiannan City were shocked by the amazing thunder and couldn't sleep all night. They didn't know that this city was about to give birth to the youngest thunder retribution master in the history of the Chinese cultivation world. They thought that a terrible storm was about to come with the terrible rolling thunder. As a matter of fact, their guess was not wrong. After the night of thunder ended, a raging storm immediately swept across the land. Sorry, I couldn't stand it in the middle of the second update yesterday, so I went to sleep. I got up early today and finished the update. Chapter 830. After Li Yundong's thunder tribulation yang spirit returned to his body, he let out a long breath. When he opened his eyes again, he was surprised to find a girl lying in front of him not far away. The girl's graceful body was curled up into a ball. Her exquisite figure was curled up, and her black hair was scattered, but it could not hide her delicate and beautiful face. This girl was none other than Su Chan. When Li Yundong saw the little girl's sleeping posture, he immediately remembered that when she had first appeared by his side, she had also looked like this. Li Yundong couldn't help but laugh, then he walked over and gently picked up the little girl. Su Chan was sleeping soundly. When she felt someone holding her, she opened her eyes and took a look. When she saw that it was Li Yundong, she said, "Yundong, have you finished the thunder tribulation?" Li Yundong said softly, "Silly girl, why are you here?" Su Chan rolled her eyes and murmured, "I'm here to protect you. I heard that you got up again, so I came to protect you. Sister Zi Yuan and Sister Zhou Qin are all in meditation. They are not free, so I came." Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. He pinched the tip of the little girl's nose and said, "Is this how you protect me? Sleeping soundly on the side?" Su Chan was a little embarrassed. She snuggled into Li Yundong's arms and said in a sweet voice, "I'm so sleepy. This weather is so sleepy." The weather was extremely humid during the rainy season. This kind of humidity was even more obvious for a person like Su Chan, who was born with a strong yin aura. It could slow down the flow of qi and blood in her body and make it stagnant. Since ancient times, many Chinese poems have depicted beautiful women in this rainy season, indolent and inexhaustible, rolling up bead curtains, delicate and powerless. The reason for this is because the more beautiful a woman is, the more lustful she is, and the more lustful a woman is, the more likely she is to be sullen and short of breath, listless and drowsy in the rainy season of spring. When ordinary women are tired and want to sleep, they can just be dismissed as lazy women. But when beautiful women, especially beautiful women, show a lazy posture after sleeping, they really have a soft and beautiful feeling like a begonia sleeping in the spring, and being supported by a man who is weak and delicate. Li Yundong saw that Su Chan's face was still full of sleep, but she forced herself to talk to him. He couldn't help but say lovingly, "If you're sleepy, go back to your room to sleep." At this time, the little girl also slowly became more awake. She arched her head in Li Yundong's arms, looked up, and smiled. "I'm fine, I'm not sleepy anymore. You continue to go through the thunder tribulation. I'll protect you. I'm sorry just now, you found me sleeping secretly." Li Yundong laughed and said, "I've already finished. Don't be silly, go back to sleep quickly." Su Chan was stunned for a moment, then overjoyed. She couldn't help but want to exclaim loudly, but then she remembered that Zhou Qin, Zi Yuan, and the others were all cultivating in their respective rooms. If she shouted at this time, she would definitely disturb them. Su Chan immediately lowered her voice and said with excitement and joy, "Yundong, have you passed the thunder tribulation?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Not completely. I just crossed the first thunder retribution and entered the thunder retribution realm. I'll try to cross the second thunder retribution tomorrow." Su Chan put her arms around Li Yundong's waist happily and said with a smile, "Well, you're amazing. You reached the thunder retribution realm in just one day. I know that many people in the cultivation world have been undergoing thunder retribution for a long time before breaking through." Li Yundong looked at the little girl playfully and said with a smile, "Of course. Don't you see who is guarding me? How can I not be fast?" Su Chan knew that Li Yundong was making fun of her. She pulled a face at Li Yundong in embarrassment. "I didn't do it on purpose," she said. "I promise I won't be sleepy again tomorrow." Li Yundong knew that the little girl loved to sleep, and when she was sleepy, nothing could stop her from falling asleep. He smiled and said, "Well, I'm just teasing you. Now go back to sleep. It's so comfortable to sleep on the bed." Su Chan rolled her eyes and refused to let go of him. "I want to sleep with you," she said, refusing to let go of him. These days, the two of them had been spending almost every night together. Li Yundong had also become accustomed to the little girl sleeping beside him every night. He chuckled, picked up the little girl, and walked towards his bedroom. After entering the room, the little girl rolled down from Li Yundong's arms and rolled on the bed. She giggled and said, "It's more comfortable to sleep here." As she spoke, she rolled around on the bed with a pillow in her arms. After a while, the bed was wrinkled. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. "Hey, how old are you? Why are you still rolling on the bed? After all, you are a seven-tailed fox spirit, which is equivalent to a cultivator at the top phase of the Yang spirit realm. You are only one step away from the Jinshan realm. Who would believe that you look like this?" Li Yundong was just making fun of her casually. The speaker didn't mean it, but the listener took it seriously. The little girl sat up with a pillow in her arms. She knelt beside the bed and stopped moving. She said with a bitter face, "Sister Zi Yuan and Sister Zhou Qin are now masters of the Jinshan realm, but I'm still in the Yang spirit realm. I'm still in the Yangshan phase. If I hadn't absorbed the Diyuan Jindan, would still be a three-tailed fox spirit." Cultivation had always been a sore point for Su Chan. The little girl was young and her willpower was shallow. With Li Yundong in her heart, she had been unable to concentrate on cultivation. Although she had studied hard for a while, it was just a last-minute practice after all. It couldn't make her have a fundamental change. At the moment, she was watching Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin go through the thunder tribulation, but as the closest person to Li Yundong, she could only watch helplessly. No matter how insensitive she was, her heart was full of discomfort. Seeing her looking at him pitifully, Li Yundong smiled and said, "If you had worked as hard as they did, I'm afraid you would have been an eight-tailed fox long ago. Maybe they would have been the ones envious of you." Su Chan pouted and said unhappily, "You're so annoying. You have to compensate me. It's all your fault." As soon as I was in meditation, you came to disturb me. You made my cultivation stagnate. Li Yundong asked curiously, how did I disturb you? I'm not around most of the time when you are in meditation. Su Chan made a face at Li Yundong and said, of course not. As soon as I was in meditation, you ran into my heart and mind, making me unable to feel at ease. Tell me, don't you hate me? Why do I only care about liking you? Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. He held the little girl in his arms and coaxed her as if she were a child. Well, I'm sorry, little girl. Don't be angry. I'll make it up to you, okay? The little girl giggled, her eyes rolling, and said, how do you want to compensate me? Li Yundong saw that the little girl was born to be charming. There were countless romantic feelings in her eyes, and the corners of her mouth were always full of charm. In particular, when the little girl's eyes moved, she looked at him affectionately. The seductive eyes at the corners of her eyes were really very attractive, and it made people want to have sex. But the most irresistible thing was that Su Chan had no intention of seduction, so the corners of her eyes and mouth were full of seduction. Her whole body was full of charm, but her eyes were full of purity and innocence, without the slightest emotion. This charming and lovely person had such a look in her eyes. This was really a kind of fatal poison. Even Lu Xiaohui couldn't control himself. He clearly knew that this was a strong poison, but he still wanted to drink it in one gulp for the sake of pleasure. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He held the little girl in his arms, kissed her lips, and said with a smile, you have to pay your debt, okay? I'll devote myself to you. Is that okay? Su Chan also giggled. Her little tongue gently licked the corner of her pink and tender lips, and she giggled and said, no, it seems that I'm the one who is at a disadvantage. If Li Yundong had not cultivated to a high level, this little girl was indeed the biggest poison in the world. As the saying goes, sex is like a bone scraper. Although one sexual encounter was not enough to make a person weak, or from prosperity to decline, it was not enough. But when it comes to women, the scariest thing is when the man is unaware, bit by bit, the most precious thing on a man's body. The first sentence of Jin Ping Mei quoted a poem written by Lu Dongbin, the body of a beautiful woman in her 20s is soft, and the sword at the waist beheads the fool. Obviously, no head falls, but secretly, the bones of the monarch are dry. This sentence showed the harm of beauty to people. Su Chan was about 16 years old, which was the beautiful age of, the body of a beautiful woman in her 20s is soft. Looking at her soft and slender waist, Li Yundong really felt that there was a sharp sword hidden in it. If it had been another man, he might have cut off a big head without making a sound. But Li Yundong was not an ordinary man after all. He had already cultivated to the Jinshan phase. The strength of his Niden, the stability of his qi, and the stability of his Jinqi were rare at that time. Perhaps only the mystical silver fox with the mystical destiny who had recovered her full strength could compare with him. If he had sex with Su Chan, he would not be worried about Li Yundong, but Su Chan would be worried that Li Yundong would take away her Yuanin. Hearing what the little girl said, Li Yundong smiled and whispered in her ear, don't worry, I will be very gentle. I won't let you suffer. Su Chan only felt that he was speaking in her ear, and a gust of hot air blew over, making her ears soft and itchy. Her heart was warm, and her belly was also hot. She felt weaker and weaker all over. She knew that her master was in love at this time and wanted to have sex with her. The little girl also felt warm in her heart. She raised her eyes and looked at Li Yundong, only to see that he was staring at her, his eyes full of tenderness and love. She suddenly thought of the little things she had been with Li Yundong, of his love and single-mindedness for her, and of the joys and sorrows she had experienced with him. She couldn't help but be extremely moved. She thought to herself, Yundong is so good to me. If he wants me, then I will give it to him. Thinking of this, the little girl's body was hot all over. With a moan, she raised her head and took the initiative to kiss Li Yundong, entangling with his tongue. Ah. The the little girl is going to be pushed down. Chapter 8:31. The two of them kissed for a long time before their lips parted. Li Yundong couldn't help but laugh when he saw that there was still a trace of crystal at the corner of the girl's mouth. He reached out and wiped the corner of the girl's mouth with a smile. At this time, the girl was extremely shy. Seeing Li Yundong laugh, she thought that he was laughing at her, so she plunged into Li Yundong's arms and said angrily, "You're so annoying. You're laughing at me." As soon as she lowered her head, she saw that Li Yundong had set up a small tent, which was very high. She pouted and reached out to grab it. "That's what you get for laughing at me." At this time, Li Yundong's abdomen was really as hard as a Vajra pestle. He only felt that there was an invulnerable golden body in front of him, and he was afraid that it would be smashed by his pestle. Being touched by the little girl's soft and slender hand, Li Yundong suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. Like a raging flame meeting oil, it burned more and more vigorously. Seeing Li Yundong raise his head and take a deep breath, the girl couldn't help but laugh and say with great pride, "Hee hee, let's see if you can still laugh at me." After taking a deep breath, Li Yundong pretended to be angry and glared at her. "Little girl, you're naughty. You're happy to see me in pain." Su Chan's eyes sparkled and she giggled. She flipped her hair behind her ear and gave him a playful and charming wink. Then, she lowered her head and went back to sleep. Even though Li Yundong had the strength of King Kong, he couldn't help but tremble. Countless thunderbolts seemed to explode in his mind, and the billions of cells in his body seemed to be shouting with joy. The little girl loved her lover to the extreme. In order to please him, she did not hesitate to use a lot of romantic means. Li Yundong saw that she was busy, and her little head was like a chicken pecking rice. He couldn't help but pull her up and said with a smile, "Well, don't be busy. Today, I'm making it up to you." The little girl saw that Li Yunyang was like a 9-patterned coiling dragon pillar. Not only did it soar into the sky, but it also had blue veins protruding from its surface. It looked extremely terrifying. She couldn't help but be frightened and secretly feel timid. She secretly glanced at the thing and said with fear on her face, "Master, I'm a little scared." I'll help you out, okay?" He had read countless Japanese blockbusters. It could be said that he had already cultivated to the realm of reading all the AV movies in the world. His eyes were filled with code, and his heart was filled with desire. As the saying goes, if you are familiar with 300 Tang poems, you won't know how to write obscene poems. Ahem, even if you don't know how to recite poems, you can still recite poems. He had read a lot of them in his daily life, so when he really went to the battlefield, he was naturally skilled. Since ancient times, men and women were the same. When a man's sperm went to the brain, his qi and blood would boil, and the qi of the liver and kidney would intersect, causing the qi of the lower dantian in the lower abdomen to break through the huagai acupoint and go straight to the shinting acupoint in the brain. This would cause the qi of the upper dantian in the brain to be chaotic, and his IQ would be terrifyingly low. Sometimes, for the sake of lust, men would even do all kinds of stupid things. Killing and arson were not a problem. This was the reason why people were so bold. In the same way, when a woman was aroused by lust, she would also have such a performance. Since ancient times, how many women who couldn't keep their loneliness colluded with outsiders and turned around to harm their original partners? Wasn't it all for the sake of being together with her lover, so that the two of them could be together for a long time and be happy in the future? Li Yundong smiled slightly, held the little girl's face, looked at her gently, and said softly, "Chaner, I'm here." Su Chan looked at Li Yundong with blurred eyes and nodded gently. Although Li Yundong's cultivation was far higher than Su Chan's, Su Chan was, after all, a demon fox, and the fox was the most een in the world. It was born to attract and even restrain men. Chapter 8:33. Although the process was a little thrilling, Su Chan successfully completed the transformation from a girl to a woman. At this moment, her unique charm and enchanting vixen were fully revealed. Even if Li Yundong was a bronze Vajra or an iron Luohan, he would still become soft in front of this peerless enchanting woman. Even a living Buddha with strong willpower would not be able to withstand it. What's more, Li Yundong and Su Chan were in love with each other. Although they had just finished the battle, after the exchange of their yin and yang qi, they had both benefited. The jinqi in their bodies was boiling, and it was even stronger than before. Although Li Yundong had opened his qi and handed over his virgin yuanyang qi, he had also obtained Su Chan's virgin yuanyang qi. Although the quality was not equal, the combination of the supreme yin and the supreme yang qi in the world was really like a dragon and a tiger, and water and ice were melted. Li Yundong's body suddenly underwent earth-shaking changes. At this time, his qi and blood were surging, and the beautiful woman in front of him was so active and charming. How could he bear it? He only let Su Chan sit on his body for a while, and then he got on the horse again and whipped. At this time, both of them had experience, so they each guarded their qi. It was not until both of them were about to explode that they tacitly handed over their yuanjing to each other. This time, the yuanyang qi in Li Yundong's body completely merged with Su Chan's yuanyang qi. Solitary yang did not last long, and it was easy to break when it was hard. This referred to the fact that although the yang qi in a man's body was strong and explosive, it was because it was too strong that this power could not last long. The so-called good is like water. Although it was the softest thing in the world, dripping water could wear through a stone. The precious thing was perseverance. Chu Bawang could lift 1,000 kilograms, but if he was asked to lift a weapon weighing 10 kilograms for a few hours without moving, he would not be able to do it even if he was killed. It could be seen that the most difficult thing about holding strength was endurance. Li Yundong's explosive power and endurance were among the best in the cultivation world, but he also knew that the last time he fought against the leader of the Tiantai sect, Imagawa Kagumo, who was in the Thunder Retribution realm, he had a big advantage. Firstly, Imagawa Kagumo's cauldron was decaying and his physical body was old. He was already at the age of an old steed in the stable. On the other hand, he was still young and his cauldron was full of vigor. He was at the age of a newborn calf. Secondly, Imagawa Kagumo had been severely injured previously. Otherwise, he would not have coughed up blood and died in a battle. Compared to the golden body, the Thunder Tribulation was stronger in terms of endurance. Just think about it, a person could persevere under the continuous strikes of the heavenly thunder, but he couldn't persevere in a fight with mortals. What kind of logic was this? Therefore, Li Yundong knew that if Imagawa Kagumo fought with him without any injuries, he would probably be in danger. Even if he was young and full of vigor, it would be as difficult as ascending to heaven to exhaust the jinqi of the other party in the Thunder Tribulation realm. At this time, Li Yundong's body had Su Chan's yuanyin qi. It was like a man and a woman combining. From then on, yin and yang could intersect and give birth to a new life. When the two qis in Li Yundong's body intersected, they could produce yin and yang. From then on, the qi in his body would be endless and continuous. The same was true for Su Chan. She only felt that her body was extremely hot, as if there was lava rolling through her meridians. After the second time with Li Yundong, she finally couldn't withstand the steaming attack of the yang qi in her body and fell into a deep sleep. On the other hand, Li Yundong sat cross-legged and meditated, completely digesting the yuanyin qi in his body. The two of them could be said to have taken what they needed. From now on, Li Yundong's spiritual power and jinqi had a lasting power. With his explosive power, this would undoubtedly make his strength achieve an astonishing breakthrough. After she fell asleep, the jinqi in her body surged, and she unconsciously revealed her fox body. Her whole body was covered with fiery red soft fur, and her 7 fox tails were constantly wriggling. After a while, the 8th tail grew out, and the 8th tail was the same color as the middle tail. They were both golden. Even the little girl herself didn't know that after she and Li Yundong had sex and cultivated together, she had broken through the biggest bottleneck of fox cultivation in one fell swoop. She had jumped from 7 tails to 8 tails. In fact, she was not the first fox spirit in the world to benefit greatly from sexual techniques. Before her, there was an old senior of the fox Zen school, the mystical silver fox, who had set an example in this regard. The mystical silver fox's spiritual power and cultivation had made a qualitative leap. It was all because Zen master Huifa had saved her from the edge of Qigong deviation with his boy Yuanyang body. Although the two of them had met by chance, the mystical silver fox had obtained the boy Yuanyang Qi of Zen master Huifa. From then on, the yin and yang Qi in her body had merged, and Buddhism and Taoism had merged. Since then, her spiritual power and Jinqi had been endless and vast. When she had completely passed through the thunder tribulation and cultivated to the golden immortal realm, her strength had far surpassed that of ordinary golden immortals, and she had become a monster that others in the cultivation world could not reach. Of course, if it was just the boy Yuanyang Qi of an ordinary boy, it would be fine. However, Huifa was the reincarnation of Manjushri Bodhisattva. His boy Yuanyang Qi was no worse than that of Xuanzang. When Xuanzang went to the west to seek scriptures, how many demons and ghosts wanted to eat his flesh and how many female demons wanted to have sex with him? Could it be that these female demons only valued Xuanzang's handsome appearance? Don't be kidding. When it came to cultivation, could being handsome be eaten? Xuanzang was one of the greatest translators of Han Buddhism in China. Moreover, compared with Huifa, the rarest thing about him was that he was neither the reincarnation of living Buddha nor the reincarnation of Bodhisattva. He was just an ordinary mortal. His original name was Chen Zhao. When he was young, he became a monk because his family was in difficulty and he could not make a living. Tang Sanzang was famous in Chengdu and China during the Sui dynasty. When he was 22 years old, he went to Jingzhou to preach Buddhism, attracting famous monks from the Huaihai area to gather and listen to his lectures devoutly. Even the 60-year-old eminent monk Zhi Yan was very respectful to him. When he was 25 years old, Xuanzang traveled around Chang'an and studied all kinds of theories. His talent was so great that it shook Chang'an. Such an eminent monk, his boy Yuanyang was really a treasure that could not be bought with money. It was not enough to describe it as priceless. He was going to the West to seek scriptures. Which female cultivator would not be envious and which female demon would not be shocked? If she absorbed his boy Yuanyang, she could really save dozens of years of cultivation. Huifa was born at the end of the Tang dynasty, but he was the reincarnation of Manjushri Bodhisattva. His talent was even higher than Xuanzang's. Therefore, after his boy Yuanyang was taken away by the mystical silver fox, he immediately created an almost unbeatable monster in the world. Li Yunyang was the reincarnation of the immovable wisdom king. In terms of profound knowledge and comprehension of Buddhist scriptures, he might not be as good as Xuanzang and Huifa, but in terms of spiritual power cultivation and Yuanyang, he was far better than the two of them. Therefore, as soon as his boy Yuanyang was taken by Su Chan immediately soared into the sky. Her spiritual power cultivation suddenly surpassed Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin, and even surpassed the 8-tailed fox Lu Yi. If other female cultivators knew about such a coincidence, they would be so envious that their eyes would turn red. However, such a thing could only happen once, not twice. After all, a boy Yuanyang could only be a virgin once, and it was impossible for a man to be a virgin for the rest of his life. When Li Yundong opened his eyes again, he was shocked by Su Chan. Although he had seen Su Chan show her real body, at that time, she was a small 3-tailed fox spirit. But now, she was a huge 8-tailed fox in the room, like a small mountain. In particular, the 8 tails of the 8-tailed fox kept swaying like tassels, and the 2 golden tails in the middle were flowing with a faint golden brilliance, which was very beautiful. Li Yundong was both surprised and happy. He was surprised that 2 of Su Chan's 8 tails were golden, which was very dazzling and strange. He was happy that Su Chan had broken through to the realm of the 8-tailed fox in the blink of an eye. She was only one level away from the highest realm of the nine-tailed fox. Li Yundong was surprised by the rapid progress of the little girl's cultivation, but he couldn't help but be happy and worried. While he was happy for Su Chan, he couldn't help but worry. If the little girl continued to cultivate like this and reached the realm of the nine-tailed fox, what should he do? Since ancient times, when the nine-tailed fox appeared, the world would be in chaos. This was not something that could be casually said. If the little girl cultivated to the realm of the nine-tailed fox, what would happen? Li Yundong didn't dare to think about it, nor did he want to think about it. Although he had vaguely guessed something, he was more and more sure of one thing in his heart: he had to take good care of the girl in front of him and love her as much as she loved him without any regrets. Li Yundong silently watched Su Chan. After a while, the beautiful fox fur on Su Chan's body slowly faded, revealing a curvy and curvaceous body. The little girl fell asleep in a daze, not knowing that she had become the fox spirit with the highest cultivation in the Fox Zen school. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. He reached out to pinch the tip of the little girl's nose and shouted softly, "Hey, girl, wake up. The sun is shining on your butt." Su Chan vaguely heard Li Yundong shout. She was slightly startled and her body trembled. She quickly rubbed her eyes and forced herself to open them. She looked out, only to see that there was a thunderstorm outside. The sky was dark, and there was no sun. The little girl suddenly became unhappy and muttered, "You're so annoying. You lied to me. Where is the sun?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Are you stupid? Let's fly up and go through the clouds. Can't we see it?" Su Chan still pouted and said, "I'm not a Jinshin master. How can I go through the clouds? It's full of heavenly thunder." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Are you really not a Jinshin master now? Are you sure?" When Su Chan heard Li Yundong's words, she was stunned. Then she subconsciously ran the Jinshi in her body. The little girl's eyes immediately widened and she said, I broke through to the realm of the eight-tailed fox. How is this possible?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "Don't you see what treasure you've got?" Only then did Su Chan remember that she had obtained the Yuanyang of Li Yundong, the reincarnated Wisdom King, which was equivalent to decades of hard work. Moreover, this aura was the purest supreme yang qi in the world. It was definitely not addition. Once this aura merged with her supreme yin qi, the effect would cause her cultivation to increase exponentially. Su Chan couldn't help but be overjoyed. In this way, I can go through the thunder retribution with you." Li Yundong laughed and put his arms around the little girl's soft waist. "Okay, I'll accompany you to see the meteor shower." Su Chan giggled and said, "How can there be a meteor shower at this time? There is a thunderstorm." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Then I'll take you to see the thunderstorm." After that, the two of them looked at each other and smiled. After the yang spirit left their bodies, they flew towards the rolling thunderclouds hand in hand. Chapter 834. Li Yundong and Su Chan had just flown together, and their love for each other was like oil and honey. They were really reluctant to be separated even when the yang spirit was flying into the sky. Their fingers were tightly intertwined, as if they were afraid that the other would disappear in the next second. At this time, although it was raining heavily, thunder and lightning were intertwining in the clouds, and the world was dark. Only when lightning flashed and thunder rumbled would it instantly illuminate the world. However, in such a hazy night, Li Yundong and Su Chan felt very bright in their hearts, and the rumbling thunder in their ears seemed to reveal a sense of joy. The two of them held hands and were about to fly into the thunderclouds when they suddenly heard the thunder inside and a loud crack. Li Yundong looked up and saw that after the thunder, countless golden lights were scattered everywhere. After a while, they flew back to their home in Tiannan City. Li Yundong smiled and said, "It seems that Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin are going through the thunder retribution." Su Chan blinked her eyes and said, They are so powerful. They can start going through the thunder retribution now." By the way, Yundong, who do you think is going through the thunder retribution? Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, it's hard to say. It could be anyone. Both of them have been taught by Master Zhang Zhishuan. As long as they understand what infinite void is and what unity of heaven and man is, they will be qualified to go through the thunder retribution. Both of them are talented and intelligent, and they are extremely rare cultivation geniuses. Zi Yuan was originally an inner disciple, so she has a very deep understanding of cultivation. The reason why she has not made any breakthrough in cultivation is that she is stuck in the bottleneck of Yang spirit and Jinshan. Previously, when she absorbed the divine qi of the Diyuan Jindan on Tiandu Peak, it can be said that she has successfully broken through to the Jinshan phase. With her comprehension and aptitude, it is not difficult for her to comprehend the immortal Jinshan phase. Although she did not inherit such divine power, her body was also transformed by the elixir. Although her cultivation has always been a little lower than Ziyuan's, she has been cultivating hard. The time and energy she spends on cultivation every day are far more than ours. Moreover, she has read the heaven patching technique before and has a deeper understanding of cultivation. I think it is not surprising that she has broken through to the realm of the immortal golden body at this time. As Li Yundong was speaking, he saw another person flashing with a faint golden light fly out of the house in Tiannan City. From a distance, he could vaguely recognize that it was a woman. The woman had a slim figure and exuded an ethereal and elegant aura. Su Chan immediately laughed and said, I know. This is Sister Zi Yuan. That was Sister Zhou Qin just now. The two of them are so powerful. They're taking turns to undergo the lightning tribulation. Li Yundong also nodded with approval in his eyes. He turned back and pinched Su Chan's nose. You can go through the thunder tribulation now. Do you want to go with me? Su Chan made a face at Li Yundong and said, no, it's not good to go through the thunder tribulation together. It's easy to get into trouble. Li Yundong knew that if two people went through the thunder tribulation in a thundercloud, it was indeed easy to cause a big accident, because the power of the heavenly thunder was automatically judged according to the strength of the person who was going through the tribulation. The stronger the person was, the more powerful the heavenly thunder would be, and vice versa. If two people went into a thundercloud at the same time to undergo the thunder tribulation, the heavenly thunder would automatically add up the strength of the two people and determine that they were one person. Then, the terrifying heavenly thunder would fall. Such a heavenly thunder was definitely not something a person could withstand alone. Even Li Yundong would be scared out of his wits. Li Yundong saw that Su Chan's words were reasonable, so he said with a smile, well, let them go through the thunder tribulation first. Let's go play in the sky for a while. This thundercloud was huge and continuous, almost covering the entire Tiannan city. Li Yundong took Su Chan and flew far away before they got out of the range of the thundercloud. The two of them flew up into the sky hand in hand. After passing through the rolling thundercloud, they suddenly broke through the thick clouds. The bright moonlight immediately sprinkled on them like water, making them look like they were wearing a thin layer of white gauze. Li Yundong took Su Chan's hand and stood high in the sky with her. Looking down, the two of them saw thick black clouds rolling under their feet, and the starry sky around them seemed to have been washed. Although they didn't see the sun that Li Yundong had mentioned before, the bright moon was hanging high in the sky. Except for the dull thunder rolling under their feet, there was no other sound. Only the eternal starry sky and the cold full moon accompanied them, silent and bright, and they were in a tranquil space. At this time, the world was quiet, and there was no tense atmosphere of transcending the thunder tribulation. Li Yundong and Su Chan held hands, looked at each other, and smiled. Li Yundong saw that the little girl was smiling sweetly, as if honey was about to flow out of the corners of her eyes and eyebrows. She was extremely sweet. He couldn't help laughing and said, "Why are you smiling so happily?" Su Chan held Li Yundong's hand tightly and said in a daze, "Yundong, my biggest dream in the past was to travel around with you. Now this dream has suddenly come true. I feel happy in my heart." I'm so afraid that this happy life will not last long. Li Yundong laughed and reached out to pinch the tip of the little girl's nose. Don't be silly. We will always be happy. I'll take you wherever you want to go in the future, okay? Su Chan was delighted when she heard this. She happily stretched out her little finger and said, okay, let's make a pinky promise for 100 years. The two of them held hands affectionately and swore to the sky like two children, making a vow that would last for 100 years. At this moment, in the faraway Japan, a thunderstorm had also descended on this land. In the sky above Mia Prefecture, a loud crack of thunder shattered the night. A bolt of lightning cut through the sky and suddenly illuminated the world. Ise Chimo's beautiful face was also instantly illuminated by the lightning, but it was only for a moment. Soon, lightning rolled across the sky, and her face was quickly hidden in the night along with the surrounding shrines. Next to her, Ise Xinguang was sitting cross-legged in the long corridor of the shrine, with a tea tray and tea set in front of him. He was making tea leisurely, looking up at the sky from time to time, which was filled with thunder and lightning. Mia Prefecture was an important place for tea in Japan. Its output ranked third in the country, and it had a long history of tea culture. Similarly, this prefecture had once been the ancestral home of Ise Shinto. Even in modern times, many foreign tourists came to Mia Prefecture. If they didn't go to the famous Ise Grand Shrine, it was equivalent to not going to Mia Prefecture. Behind Ise Xinguang was the famous Fengshoku Grand Shrine of the Ise Grand Shrine. Looking at these buildings during the day, people would feel that these antique Japanese-style buildings exuded a sense of solemnity and majesty, like a neat line of samurai, which made people not dare to be presumptuous. When night fell, the divine palace was hidden in the darkness, like a group of giants hiding behind a curtain of darkness, adding to its majesty. Especially at this time, the rain was like strings of pearls that flowed along the eaves of the divine palace, forming curtains of water. This made this place even more mysterious. Oh, it's true. This time the thunder retribution period seems to be particularly powerful. After pouring himself a cup of tea, Ise Xinguang held the teacup in one hand and stroked his unshaven chin with the other, clicking his tongue. Ise Xinguang's words seemed to be directed at Ise Izumo, but it also seemed like he was talking to himself. Izumo looked down at him, then continued to look up at the sky, as if he was thinking about something while looking at the rolling thunderclouds in the sky. Ise Xinguang looked at her curiously and couldn't help asking, "Hey, you've been looking up for a long time. Aren't you afraid that your neck is sore? Is it that beautiful? Why didn't I find that you used to be so interested in thunder and rain?" Ise Chuyun lowered her head again and looked at Xinguang deeply. She said softly, "I'm wondering, why did Li Yundong defeat me so easily back then?" Ise Xinguang couldn't help sighing. He knew that Ise Chuyun was proud and arrogant. Although she had been defeated by Li Yundong at that time, after returning home, she couldn't understand why Li Yundong, who was like an arrow at the end of its flight, could still defeat her. With this question in mind, when Ise Chuyun returned, she began to frantically read the cultivation classics of China's Taoism. In this era where knowledge and information were exploding, almost no sect or ancient book had any secrets to speak of. Perhaps the most important words had to be passed down orally by the head of the sect. Without these words, these martial arts would only be second-rate martial arts. But what Ise Chuyun wanted to find was the most basic reason. She began to suspect that there was something wrong with the cultivation methods of the Japanese, just like Tsuruko Tachibana, who had been fetching water for a long time with a wooden bucket with 5 holes. It was a very simple reason that restricted the development of the entire Japanese cultivation world. But even if there were wise people who understood it, they were powerless to change it. This was because the Japanese cultivation world had been flourishing since the Meiji Restoration. Even after the defeat in World War II, the cultivation world had become more and more prosperous and powerful by relying on General MacArthur's draft constitution on freedom of religious belief. However, at this time, the Chinese cultivation world, which had been powerful for 2,000 years, had completely fallen to the bottom. Japan had used its own prosperity and strength to fight against China's decline. How could they not be disloyal when one side was on the other side? In the past 100 years, in the countless collisions between China and Japan, most of the Chinese and Japanese cultivation worlds had been the vanguard. The two sides had fought countless times, and the Japanese cultivation world had won several large-scale victories against China. This kind of victory had never been seen in the history of the Japanese cultivation world for more than 1,000 years. As a result, the attitude of the Japanese cultivators, who used to be respectful and cautious students, suddenly turned into the attitude of the arrogant and condescending nouveau riche. The so-called victory concealed everything. With the support of the government and the fanatical support of the people, the Japanese cultivators quickly cultivated a large number of murderous demons and fighting machines like Takahashi Shoda. Their existence was completely different from the cultivators of the Chinese cultivation world, who existed for immortal cultivation. They only existed for one purpose: victory. In order to win, they would do anything. This kind of cultivation method was close to the devil's way, but when the whole country was possessed by the devil's way became the right way, and the real immortal way became the devil's way instead. Whether it was Japanese Buddhism or ISE Shrine, most of their cultivation methods paid attention to speed, stability, and ruthlessness. Moreover, this kind of power mostly came from faith and inheritance. With the support of the faith power of hundreds of millions of believers, it was too easy for a cultivator to become stronger through the power of faith. The cultivation of Japanese cultivators was fast and easy, so most of them only cultivated their nature and did not cultivate their fate. Therefore, they did not pay attention to the Zhuji phase, and it was impossible for them to go through the thunder tribulation. It was precisely because the power came so quickly and easily that the entire Japanese cultivation world fell into an inexplicable exaggeration and arrogance. No one was willing to think about it, and no one was willing to take the amazing risk of going through the thunder tribulation. But when these Japanese suddenly met Li Yunyang, the reincarnated wisdom king, and were defeated by him twice in a row, the entire Japanese cultivation world was shocked. Finally, some people began to seriously reflect. Ise Chuyun was one of them. She had become the Ksitigarbha goddess at a young age, and her power was equivalent to that of the thunder tribulation realm. It was extremely rare for her to have such achievements at such a young age, even in the 2,000 years of history of the cultivation world of China. Naturally, it was impossible for her to reach such a realm by relying on her own beauty, and it was even more impossible for her to rely on the support of the power of faith. She had relied more on her extraordinary understanding and intelligence. There was no lack of wise people in Japan, but due to the limitations of their innate structure, they were often short-sighted. They could only plan one thing, but not the overall situation. Li Yunyang's head-on attack made Ise Chuyun vaguely feel that there seemed to be a huge problem with the cultivation methods of the entire Japanese cultivation world. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to be defeated by the same person again and again. But what was the problem? Ise Chuyun could feel that if he could understand this truth, not only would his strength improve by leaps and bounds, but even the entire Japanese cultivation world would be turned upside down. Sometimes, the truth seemed simple to outsiders, but the insiders couldn't see it no matter how hard they tried. For example, Tsuruko Tachibana had been carrying a 5-leaky wooden bucket for so many years, but he just couldn't understand Wang Yuanshan's hint. Ise Chuyun also faintly looked at the rolling thunderclouds in the sky, deep in thought. But the answer he wanted seemed to be separated by an invisible layer of gauze. He could touch it, but he couldn't get it. Ise Shengguang saw that Chuyun's eyes had been flickering, as if she was about to understand something in the next second. But the next second, she still maintained this posture without moving at all. It was like there was an apple on her head that was on the verge of falling. If it fell, Newton would discover the law of universal gravitation, but the apple just wouldn't fall. Ise Shengguang looked at it and shook his head, then slowly drank his tea. It was at this moment that a bolt of lightning suddenly flashed in the sky, bringing with it a series of sparks. Ise Chuyun's eyes suddenly flashed. She stood up straight and was about to shout enlightenment. Suddenly, a figure flashed on the stone path outside the divine palace. It was a monk in a cassock and a bamboo hat. The monk didn't care about the heavy rain on his head. Before he got close, he shouted from afar, "Lord Shenguang, Lord Chuyun. Oh no, something big has happened." Ise Shenguang and Ise Chuyun both turned their heads to look at the monk at the same time. They saw the monk running to them, panting, and saying breathlessly, "God, the mystical silver fox, has appeared." This sentence was no small matter. It immediately shocked the two of them, and they said in unison, "What did you say?" The monk took a deep breath, as if he had just run for more than 1,000 miles. "The mystical silver fox has appeared in Shuya. Well, there was a bug before. It should be rain after the beginning of spring, and after the rain, it is Jingzha. I remembered it wrong and made it the vernal equinox. It has been corrected. I apologize to all my readers. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.